Chapter 1522. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation, this isn't a reason. If it's difficult, it's difficult. Dong Wuxiang snorted. Even if it's Mo Tianji facing 800,000 supreme martial artists alone. With such a huge disparity in strength, it's still difficult. Wu Jueqing snorted heavily. He really wanted to slap this guy into a rock. Damn it, even though I know you're telling the truth, isn't this truth a little too ugly? We have to help him break this stalemate. Chu Yang said, if this stalemate continues, Mo Tianji and Diwu Qingru can keep their composure. But I'm afraid, the experts from the Li clan won't be able to keep their composure. If they make a move, it'll be completely ruined. Besides, not far from the north is the Li clan's base camp. Even though the allied forces won't deal with the women and children there before the end of the battle, if someone can't keep their composure and decides to check, it'll also be a huge problem. Our side has this concern, but the allied forces don't. They can continue to drag this out. In this kind of stalemate, no matter which side takes the initiative first, they'll definitely lose or even die. Amole frowned. I've been thinking about this problem too. But how can we break this awkward stalemate? Chu Yang calmly spat out a word, lure. Given the current situation, both Diwu Qingru and Mo Tianji knew that they were at a stalemate. Mo Tianji wanted to break the stalemate, but so did Diwu Qingru. Neither of them was willing to let the stalemate continue like this. Two exceptionally intelligent people, faced with the same situation, each used their strongest intelligence to plot against the other. The result of racking their brains was actually a stalemate like this. Because at this moment, whoever made the first move would be at a disadvantage. Even though Diwu Qingru had sent out a group of people, it was far from all of them. The allied forces still had a lot of backup forces. On the other side, more than half of them had yet to move. Mo Tianji knew that Diwu Qingru was waiting for him to make a move before making a move. But he didn't know how much strength he was still holding back and how he was preparing to deal with the backup. This was the so-called knowing how it is but not why it is. Diwu Qingru could launch a head-on attack at any time if Mo Tianji made the first move. And Mo Tianji wouldn't be able to bear the consequences of that. On the other hand, it was the same for Diwu Qingru. Diwu Qingru knew that Mo Tianji had ordered the Li clan members to hide so that he could make the first move. However, he didn't know how Mo Tianji was going to act. If he moved first and the other party launched a full-scale counterattack, then he would be at a disadvantage. Therefore, neither of them could make the first move, nor did they want to make the first move. At a time like this, they could only fall into a stalemate. Also, Mo Tianji and Diwu Qingru were both clear about one thing. If there was no external force to break this stalemate could only continue. Could take a day, 10 days, or even 3 to 5 months. But if this stalemate continued, both of them would be equally anxious. In comparison, Mo Tianji's concerns were greater. The Li clan's foundation was far inferior to the alliance's. If Diwu Qingru gave up on the battle of wits with him, and the alliance was willing to pay a certain amount of losses, they could definitely break through the last line of defense in one go and march into the Li clan's headquarters. Then it would be completely over. Therefore, both of them were eagerly waiting for an external force to intervene. As long as an external force intervened, this stalemate could be broken. Once the stalemate was broken, there would naturally be endless follow-up. And Chu Yang also saw this aspect and decided to make a move. The two wise men were in a stalemate. Naturally, they needed a third party to change the situation. Lure? Mo Qingwu said worriedly, but how? We don't have many people here. How can we intervene? Haha, right now I can only use myself as bait to break this delicate stalemate. This is the only way to create an opportunity for Mo Tianji. Jianghu took a deep breath. Using himself as bait? Entering the battlefield alone? No. How can we do that? Everyone said at the same time. It's really too risky. Even Wu Juqing didn't agree with this. The battle in front of them couldn't be compared to a battle in the secular world. It was a battle formed by countless supreme martial artist experts. Even someone as strong as Wu Juqing might not be able to gain an advantage if he entered alone, let alone Chu Yang. Currently, he was only a second-grade supreme martial artist. If he entered recklessly, it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that he would die. I know that this is a risky move. However, if we continue to drag this out, it will be greatly disadvantageous to Tianji's deployment. Once Diwu Qingru loses his patience and gives up on the battle between the wise men with Tianji, then there will be no turning back the situation, Chu Yang said. Just as Chu Yang was trying his best to persuade everyone and everyone was insistent on dissuading him, a sudden change occurred. There was actually another external force intervening. It was just that no one would have thought that the external force would actually be this person. This external force could be Chu Yang, it could be Tan Tan, it could even be Wu Juqing. Of course, if Wu Juqing were to intervene at this time, it would seem a little too shameless. However, this person's appearance at this time was really too unexpected. Just as both sides were in a stalemate where they could neither advance nor retreat, a clear and bright laughter suddenly rang out. Then a green figure streaked across the sky like a shooting star, bringing with it a fresh and refreshing morning breeze. That green figure stood in front of Wu Qingrou's troops just like that. Moreover, he was using a very arrogant, unbridled, and unscrupulous attitude to face them with a golden blade. It was the kind of despicable behavior that you wanted to beat him up 100 times, 1,000 times, even in your dreams. Xiao Qinyu's pupils shrank rapidly. It's you? It's actually you? I haven't gone to look for you yet, and you actually dare to come out on your own. That person laughed wildly. In the air, he was graceful and elegant as if he was good at dancing with his long sleeves. He recited slowly, I am the king of all the lands. If Chu Yang could see it, then Duke Yu, who was also extremely intelligent, could naturally see it as well. Therefore he simply jumped out on his own. Not to mention the commotion caused by that person's unexpected appearance on the Allied army's side, even Chu Yang's side was extremely shocked. It was actually this fellow who had come, and he came so casually too. Was he casually or mentally ill? This question was a matter of opinion. Chu Yang's face twitched very strangely for a moment. Dong Wuxiang's face also instantly flattened. Who was Wu Jueqing? He immediately noticed the abnormality. Very interested, he asked, What's wrong? Who is this arrogant fellow? You know him, right? Chu Yang smiled bitterly. I really want to say that I don't know this arrogant fellow. Unfortunately, I can't. Not only do I not know him, Xiao Wu also knows this fellow. His name is Duke Yu. Duke Yu, huh? Wu Jueqing smacked his lips. This fellow's entrance is quite extravagant. Chu Yang said with a twisted face. Extravagant? It is indeed extravagant. You don't know, but every time he appears he always says these two sentences. When I first heard these two sentences, I really felt that this person was really imposing, really awe-inspiring, really magnanimous. When I heard these two sentences for the second time, I still felt very shocked. When it came to the third time, I felt that it was very normal and didn't feel anything special anymore. Later on, he would say it every time, as if he didn't know what fatigue was. This caused me to become completely numb a long time ago. Until now, every time I hear these two sentences, a layer of goosebumps will rise all over my body. In the ranking of the degree of disgust, he is definitely in the top 3. Chu Yang heaved a huge sigh. Too pretentious. Really, as if he would die if he didn't. Just like now, in front of a force that could crush him to death hundreds of times, he can actually still say those two sentences so impressively. I really have to take my hat off to him. The legendary playing with one's life is nothing more than this. Upon hearing Chu Yang's words, Wu Jueqing looked again at the handsome, elegant and graceful Duke Yu in midair. He felt rather emotional in his heart. He couldn't help but widen his eyes and shake his head. This fellow indeed deserves a beating. Isn't his level of arrogance even greater than mine? The Allied forces are also goddamn gutless. That little one is already like this and still acting like a coward. Don't let the Allied forces really take care of him. That bastard still owes me a fight. Dong Wuxiang snorted and said, Sooner or later, I will definitely beat that little one into a pig's head. And I will beat him up in front of his wife and aunt, only then can I vent my anger. Everyone stared at each other. They were all rather impressed by this fellow's valiance. You, a mere second-grade supreme martial artist, actually dared to say that you want to beat up another second-grade supreme martial artist? Especially when you are a saber supremacy, but what you said just now was beat up. What kind of props do you use to beat up? It seems like you can only use your fists and legs. Where exactly did Dong Wuxiang get such great confidence from? Also, to be able to make Dong Wuxiang so depressed, Duke Yu's power was really impressive. Wu Jueqing had also trampled on Dong Wuxiang many times, but he had never seen this fellow harboring such hatred in his heart. Not to mention the condemnation here. On the other side, Duke Yu's unexpected appearance had already achieved very good results. The Allied forces were naturally still very gutsy. Miao Zhendong and his brother were the first to step out. They cursed loudly, You damned beast! How dare you come here to provoke us? It's time for you to die, you evil creature. Xiao Qingyu, however, stepped out from the crowd. The spiritual monsters of heaven and earth are indeed extraordinary. You actually recovered so quickly from my attack that day. Really impressive. Chapter 1524. Part 7 Chapter 821. A long line. Everyone don't panic, listen to my command. Diwu Qingru shouted in midair. Everyone listen to my command. Don't panic. Maintain the original formation head to tail. The strongest person in each team will be the vanguard, and the law enforcement officers will take the lead. Set up the formation. Resist the strong enemy. Delay the enemy. As long as we can delay until Old Xiao and the rest return, victory will still be ours. In an instant, pieces of purple crystals scattered on the ground. No matter what, they were all veterans who had at least hundreds of years of cultivation. They knew that the situation in front of them was very dangerous. If they panicked, it would be no different from courting death. The only thing they could do was to work together to resist the attack and try their best to survive. They quickly calmed down. A dense light circle rose and an inexplicable energy surged. The formation had already taken shape in the blink of an eye. According to the original strategic arrangement, the Yi clan was supposed to take the lead. But now that Yi Xiaoyao and 2 other 8th-grade supreme martial artists of the Yi clan who came as reinforcements had gone out to chase after the treasure, they had no choice but to let the law enforcement officers, who were the strongest, take the lead. Diwu Qingru sighed in his heart. What he said just now was just to calm the hearts of the people, so that their formation wouldn't collapse completely. In the face of such a strong force, why would they need to defend? There wasn't even a chance to hope for a fluke. What he was doing now was just to prepare for a rainy day and set up a simple long-line formation with both offense and defense. He had done his best. Even if Diwu Qingru was as intelligent as a demon, he was ultimately not a prophet. If he wasn't, who would have thought that such a bizarre thing would happen at the last minute? All the important people had left? Wasn't this bullshit? What the fuck is this? But even so, Diwu Qingru still wouldn't give up just like that. He knew that resistance was futile, but he still had to do his best to face the current battle. Even if there was only a slim chance, he still had to put in a lot of effort. In the end, this battle wasn't a battle between the Li clan and the allied forces, but a battle between himself and Mo Tianji. Diwu Qingru would never give up so easily. Even if all the high-level supreme martial artists of the Li clan were to come in full force, if the remaining people were to act according to his command, they might not necessarily be unable to resist. In fact, as long as they dragged on, they might even have a chance to counterattack. At the same time, Mo Tianji's cold voice came from afar. 1 of you attack its head. 4 of you attack its abdomen. The rest of you kill its tail. Attack quickly. The high-level supreme martial artist of the Li clan scattered in mid-air. Diwu Qingru acted according to the situation and ordered, blooming abdomen, blooming flowers fill the sky. Boom. The army on the mountaintop simultaneously raised their chi and prepared to attack. When the enemy in the abdomen landed, this force would meet them head-on and deliver a head-on blow. Transform into a long dragon and attack first. Mo Tianji also shouted. No matter what, he had to force all these people down the mountain. Even if he had taken advantage of them, it was still impossible to wipe them all out. It was just a fool's dream. The current highest strategy was to take advantage of the delicate moment when the other side's masters were all out to take advantage of the situation and drive the remaining people down the mountain. This way he would achieve his expected strategic goal. Boom. Light flashed. The swords and sabers in the hands of Li Xiangxi and the others turned into streaks of sharp light at the same time. Like shocking rainbows, they flew out of their hands with the coldest and most terrifying killing intent. In midair, they were like small suns, emitting the most dazzling light and slashing down on the crowd below. Let go. Diwu Qingru roared. Below, more than 3,000 swords also flew out of their hands at the same time, facing the meteor-like sabers and the terrifying destructive force in midair. If this force landed within the formation of the allied forces would immediately collapse. Even if the formation was destroyed, the people would die too. Now that their individual combat power was far inferior to the opponent, they could only rely on the combined forces of everyone to resist. Boom, boom, boom. The combined efforts of more than 3,000 people collided fiercely with the power of this top expert. The momentum at this moment seemed to be even greater than the explosion of 8,000 people previously. Rumbling sounds of mountains collapsing and the earth cracking could still be heard from thousands of miles away. However, the mountaintop under everyone's feet did not move at all. Countless people turned pale. When they raised their heads, blood spurted out of their mouths. The 8 high-level supreme martial artists above, including Li Chuanbo, all spurted out blood at the same time. Their individual strength was far superior, and their combined attack was enough to shake the heavens and earth. However, the combined efforts of more than 3,000 supreme martial artists, coupled with the power of the formation, was equally earth-shattering. Although both parties were only throwing weapons at each other across space, the impact of the tremors and the influence of the energy movement on each other was still terrifying beyond compare. Divine senses vibrated, internal organs vibrated, and souls vibrated. This was still thanks to the collision of weapons that were thrown out. If they were really held in their hands, even Li Chuanbo would probably die in such a collision. Change the formation. Diwu Qingro let out a loud shout, and the long snake formation below suddenly changed. Rolled like a wave. The experts inside didn't dare to be negligent even if they were injured or not. They shifted their positions and changed the formation. Flying Dragon illusory form, attack, defend. Following Diwu Qingro's command, everyone had already attacked while they were moving. Streams of the purest supreme martial artist's origin energy madly shot toward Li Chuanbo and the others in midair. Diwu Qingro's command was very clear. It was both an attack and a defense. Moreover, after the formation transformed into this flying dragon illusory form, it immediately started to circulate. Li Chuanbo and the others were facing different opponents at every moment. In other words, even if you successfully injured the person opposite you a moment ago, by the time you wanted to reap the fruits of your labor, you would realize that the person in front of you had already changed. It was another person who was full of energy and was completely uninjured. The ultimate purpose of setting up such a formation was not to attack the enemy but to defend and stall for time, waiting for Xiao Qinyu and the others to return. It was not that Diwu Qingro did not want to make use of this power to take down Li Chuanbo and the others. In fact, although this person was strong, it was still difficult for him to fight against the combined strength of more than 1,000 experts. However, when he saw that more than 1,000 people from the Li clan were also about to arrive, he immediately changed his mind. If he insisted on annihilating the great experts, he might have a chance to kill a few of these high-level supreme martial artists. However, the formation would collapse instantly under the attacks of the remaining 1,000 people. Once the formation collapsed, the forces could not be gathered together. Then they could only be slaughtered unilaterally by the remaining high-level supreme martial artists. Calculating in this way, the losses would greatly outweigh the gains. Mo Qianji, who was in the air, was also constantly giving orders. Li Chuanbo and the others were also constantly changing their positions. Under Mo Qianji's command, the targets of every attack were all targeted at the weak points of the formation. The targets were precise and every move was on point. However, the opponent was the combined strength of thousands of people. No matter how powerful Li Chuanbo and the others were, it was like trying to put out a burning cart of firewood with a cup of water. They could not really pose a fatal threat. It was like punching at the sea. Even if they could create a huge ripple every time, even if they could create a huge disturbance, to this boundless sea, it was just a ripple. However, this man-made formation was ultimately not the sea. There was always a limit to how much it could withstand. In the formation, the number of injured people continued to increase. Diwu Qingro's expression was calm, but it was already so calm that it was stiff. He kept giving orders and making adjustments. Although the number of injured people was increasing, he had already stabilized his state of mind and identified the positions. The changes in the formation, however, were becoming more and more skillful. In addition, he could vaguely feel that the other party's intention of putting in so much effort to come up with this move was probably not to annihilate the people here. After all, even if there were no more high-level supreme martial artist experts, there were still more than thousands of 4th and 5th grade supreme martial artists here. They could not be swallowed. If they were to forcefully swallow them, they would only choke to death. Since they could not swallow them, they had to use force. This meant that Mo Qianji had other plans, and the only thing worth scheming about here was the terrain here. What the enemy needed was what he would not abandon. Persevering and defending was the best way to counterattack. Therefore, Diwu Qingro did not retreat an inch. As long as the formation did not completely collapse, they had to continue defending. Deafening battle cries rang out. The Li clan's reinforcements had finally reached the top of the mountain. Mo Qianji's orders were even more urgent and faster. To Mo Qianji, this mountain was indeed of utmost importance. This was because he had put in a lot of effort here. He had never thought of wiping out all these people in one go. That was obviously unrealistic. His original intention was only to force them away. But what Mo Qianji really did not expect was that Diwu Qingro, who clearly had the absolute advantage in terms of combat power, would actually rehearse such an offensive and defensive formation in advance. Strictly speaking, this formation was Mo Qianji's loss. If it were not for the absence of the other party's experts, his side might have been completely annihilated. In this formation, Diwu Qingro lost to the heavens, but won against man. It was just that whether man could conquer the heavens or not was still unknown. Diwu Qingro had seen through Mo Tianji's scheme. Mo Tianji had lost by a small margin. After finally having a chance to turn things around, the other party's well-prepared formation appeared here. This was equivalent to losing 2 rounds in a row. Although there were not too many substantial losses at the moment, Mo Tianji was already in awe. Although he never dared to underestimate the enemy, this time he had more or less underestimated Diwu Qingro and his tenacity. In this world, I am not the only one who knows how to plan for a rainy day. As Mo Tianji commanded, he secretly told himself, I am not the only one who is smart. I must not make such a mistake again. I must not underestimate any opponent. Mo Tianji's gaze was deep. This time it was the Li clan. But if the same mistake is made next time, my brothers and I will bear the consequences. Chapter 1525. Translator, Atlas Studios Editor. Atlas Studios. Mo Tianji looked at the battle and said, yes. Chu Luer said indifferently, I don't think so. Actually, neither of you are underestimating the other. On the contrary, both of you think too highly of each other. Therefore, although both of you are fully focused now and think that you are going all out, the more you think about it, the more you can't give your all. As the saying goes, follow your heart. Only then can you really give it your all. Mo Tianji's eyes lit up, deep in thought. Chu Luer said, actually, no matter if it's a human, a god or a demon, you Mo Tianji are Mo Tianji. This will never change. She turned around, her eyes sparkling. She said softly, Mo Tianji will never become Chu Yang or Ao Shiyun. Yes, no matter if it's a human, a god or a demon, I Mo Tianji am Mo Tianji. I won't become Chu Yang and I won't become Ao Shiyun. This will never change. Mo Tianji only felt that an inexplicable chain in his heart was suddenly broken by Chu Luer's few words. It was like a person who had been in a dark place for a long time suddenly opening a door in front of him. The darkness in front of him disappeared, and only endless bright sunlight shone in front of him. Mo Tianji took a deep look at Chu Luer and said sincerely, thank you, Le. Although you are younger than me, you are really my benefactor. Turning around, Mo Tianji continued to give orders. The battle below was getting more and more intense. One by one, the Li clan's supreme martial artists attacked the Great Formation crazily. In the Great Formation there were people who kept spitting out mouthfuls of blood, and then their bodies shattered. Under such attacks, it was no different from a fool's dream to leave a complete corpse. At the moment when you can't move, you don't know how much power will explode on your body. Yet, the Great Formation continued to move at high speed like a dragon. On this steep mountain peak there was no chaos at all. Diwu Qingro's orders were given precisely one after another. Wherever there was a weakness, there would be immediately remedied. Diwu Qingru made up his mind to defend till death. No matter what, he had to defend till death. This mountain peak couldn't be given to Mo Tianji. The Li clan people didn't have it easy either. Just this kind of recoil alone had already caused the death of several supreme martial artists. The 8th grade supreme martial artist went all out and attacked wildly, but in the face of the tyrannical power condensed by the formation, he was powerless and helpless. As time passed by bit, Li Chuanbo became more and more anxious. How could they not be anxious? This was clearly a heaven-sent opportunity, yet they were unable to grasp it. They were powerless to grasp it. Xiao Qinyu and the others could return at any time. If they allowed this formation to hold on until Xiao Qinyu's return, then all of them would definitely be annihilated here. This was a heaven-sent opportunity, but now could become a heaven-sent opportunity at any time. At this moment, Mo Tianji's voice rang out, 2/3 of the supreme martial artists will continue to attack. The other 1/3 will form a triangular formation and charge forward. You have to let go of the dragon's head and tail. Strike diagonally from the dragon's body. Don't face it head-on. The opportunity to defeat the enemy is now. Li Chuanbo's spirits were lifted. With a long howl, more than 200 experts surrounded them in an instant. Diwu Qingro's brows furrowed. Li Chuanbo had already done this kind of gathering 3 times previously, and there wasn't much of an effect in the end. But for some reason this time he had a very different feeling. With a thought, he immediately ordered, speed up the formation. At his command, the speed of conversion of the long snake formation sped up again. Like undulating waves, it was out of control, swift and violent. However, on the Li clan's side, more than 200 experts quickly surrounded them. Under Li Chuanbua's command, they instantly formed a huge triangle. The tip of the triangle was aimed at the formation. Mo Qinji silently calculated the operation of the formation. He shouted, "Move 3 fingers to the left of the tip of your feet and cut off at full speed." Li Chuanbua let out a long howl. With him as the arrowhead, the 200 experts launched a charge at the same time. At this moment, a long howl pierced through the air from afar. Xiao Qinyu and the others had already started to turn back. Li Chuanbua's eyes were almost spurting blood. He roared, "Break!" With his body as the arrowhead, he charged over at lightning speed. This was the last chance. Once lost, there would be no more opportunities. Succeed or die trying. In a fierce battle, every bit of time was also precious. All the high-level experts of the Li clan gave their all in a race against time, wanting to finish the job in an instant. Because Xiao Qinyu and the other enemy experts were about to rush back. If one had to say who was the most anxious, it was still the Li clan's first ancestor, Li Chuanbua. If he could grasp such a heaven-sent opportunity, it would be equivalent to leaving the Li clan with a lot more chances of survival. Could it be that he actually couldn't grasp it? Mo Qinji was still calm. He continued to issue orders and adjust the angle. After 7 or 8 adjustments, he finally gave a direct order, "Kill." Li Chuanbua led his men and charged in at top speed like a sharp arrow. Diwu Qingru had also been carefully adjusting the situation to correspond to Mo Qinji's attacks. However, the moment he heard the words "the dragon's body slanted," Diwu Qingru already knew that the destruction of this great formation was already inevitable. If it were an ordinary army in a battle between 2 countries, the dragon's body slanted would be a suicidal move. With a wave of the battle flag, the enemy slanted would be completely surrounded and drowned in the ocean. Even until death, they wouldn't be able to display any battle prowess. However, such an army composed entirely of top-notch experts against the enemy was fundamentally different from an ordinary battle formation. The reaction of such experts was 1,000 times more agile than that of an army or even more. Once it was accurately inserted, the destructive power it could cause was also extremely terrifying. As the name suggested, the straight snake formation was formed based on the transformation of the snake's body. It made use of the snake's characteristics, its flexibility, its head and tail connected, and its entire body linked together, one loop after another, continuous and endless. Attack the head and tail, attack the head and tail, attack the head and tail at the same time. However, when it came to the most powerful attack, it was the moment when the snake's body was turning. This was the time when the power was the strongest and fiercest. Ordinary snakes didn't have scales on their bodies. However, with so many people forming the straight snake formation, then, every person was equivalent to a scale on the snake's body. This was destined to be unavoidable. Although the movement of the snake was immensely powerful and carried with it inertia, its power far exceeded the combat prowess of the snake. However, every time it turned, it was also accompanied by the moment when one of the scales inevitably opened up. That moment was where the flaw was. Purely speaking of the flaw, it wasn't necessarily so. Opening up and then closing up was undoubtedly a flaw, but it could also be a trap. Because the straight snake formation formed by experts was even more tightly connected, it was naturally even harder to find a flaw. Furthermore, Diwu Qingru was constantly giving orders. This kind of flaw was even more fleeting. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that it was fleeting. Previously, Mo Qinji had commanded to break the formation 7 times in a row, and Diwu Qingru had changed 8 times in a row in order to deal with it. However, there was an additional change. Just when he thought that Mo Qinji would continue to force him to reveal a flaw, Mo Qinji unexpectedly chose to wait. Although he only waited for a moment, it was enough to change the entire situation. After that moment, he immediately ordered Li Chuanbua to launch an all-out attack. And at this moment, it just so happened that Diwu Qingru's 8th change had just begun. The old momentum was exhausted and a new momentum was born. There was no way he could react immediately. Originally, at the moment when Li Chuanbua and the others started to attack, the flaw hadn't really appeared yet. However, when this lethal force attacked, the scales of this straight snake formation unavoidably opened up at that moment due to inertia. Naturally, the flaw also appeared along with it. What precise calculations, what frightening scheming, what amazing Mo Qinji. At this moment, the powerful force that Li Chuanbua and the others had gathered rushed in like a sharp knife cutting through tofu. Boom. A series of screams rang out. Li Chuanbua rushed into the connecting points of the formation like a mad tiger. His palms were already filled with the fiercest attacks. He struck left and right. Instantly, the sound of bones and tendons breaking rang out one after another. A huge gap appeared in the formation. Li Xiangxi followed closely behind. At this moment, the yearning sword in his hand was used as a huge saber by him. He moved left and right and there was no way to stop him. A rain of blood instantly rose. Seeing this situation, Diwu Qingru finally sighed helplessly. Although he had already guessed what Mo Tianji's next step would be, there was no other way. The flaw of the Great Formation was here. As long as the attack was targeted, it would be broken sooner or later. This had nothing to do with intelligence. Screams rang out one after another. More than 200 people from the Li clan rushed into the Great Formation. The massacre thus began. It was as if a rain of blood had risen instantly. There was the blood of the allied forces as well as the flesh and blood of the Li clan. The next moment after Li Chuanbo rushed in, his clothes had already turned crimson, the brightest color. At this moment, the only thought in his mind was to kill the enemies madly. He didn't think about anything else. Because everything else was no longer important. The more enemies he killed, the more hope the Li clan had. That was all. Everyone hold on. Try your best to hold on. No one is allowed to retreat. Diwu Qingru was still able to hold on. He continued to command calmly. Although the formation of the Great Formation had been broken and there were flaws in its operation, it was only the abdomen that had been broken. The formation could still be formed from the head and tail. It could still be operated. As long as everyone maintained their composure and held on, they would definitely be able to hold on until Xiao Qinyu and the others returned. Then the situation would be reversed. Everyone continued to operate the formation. Accelerate. Don't stop. Don't stop for even a moment. Diwu Qingru's eyes flashed with coldness. This method was equivalent to directly using human lives to fill up the formation. The first few hundred people who rushed up would definitely die in the hands of this group of Li clan experts. However, as long as everyone wasn't afraid of death and continued to press forward, not only would they be able to make up for the collapse of the Great Formation, they could even wrap up these people from the Li clan like dumplings. After all, it wasn't as if the Li clan experts didn't pay a price for the attack just now. Even Li Chuanbo also suffered a considerable amount of backlash. However, if they gave up on the formation just like that, they would instead fall into the fate of being slaughtered. Without the support of the Great Formation, the 4th grade and 5th grade supreme martial artists didn't have the ability to withstand even a move or two from a high-level supreme martial artist. Chapter 1526. Elderly. Hold on, everyone hold on. Mo Tianji shouted, the dawn of victory has appeared. As long as we don't let the enemy charge past here, the formation will be completely broken. Hearing this, Li Chuanbo seemed to have received divine help. He let out a long roar and attacked with all his might. He was really like a cornerstone, going on a killing spree against the experts of the allied forces who were charging toward him like raging waves. Countless broken limbs and body parts flew in front of him, and heads rolled out one by one. The number of the 200-odd experts of the Li clan who were following him also decreased rapidly. However, no one took a step back. They would rather die than take a step back. On the other hand, the experts of the Li clan on the other two sides were charging toward them rapidly with red eyes. For a moment, the sounds of fighting were earth-shattering. A storm of blood engulfed the entire place. At this moment, even the commands from the two sides couldn't be heard at all. However, no one cared about that anymore. There was only charge and kill. Everyone's eyes were bloodshot. On the other side, Xiao Qinyu and the rest were also rushing back anxiously. Right now they were also extremely angry, annoyed, and somewhat humiliated. Until now, everyone still didn't know what that monster was and what kind of method it used. It just blindly led everyone in a big circle, and from beginning to end refused to face it head-on. Every time they felt that they were about to be caught up and were about to be surrounded, it would suddenly disappear, and then reappear in another place not far away. Xiao Qinyu and the others were toyed with until their eyes were spitting fire. They almost lost their rationality and even planned to attack with all their might. If they really launched a large-scale indiscriminate attack, and with so many people joining hands, they definitely wouldn't be able to hide their tracks anymore. However, they didn't expect that the monster would suddenly disappear after circling around. Everyone joined forces and activated their divine senses to search a large area. However, they didn't find anything. Filled with hope, they could only turn back unhappily. However, to their surprise, they realized that their base had already been turned upside down. Shocked, everyone naturally sped up and rushed over. However, they were really too far away. Even if they rushed back at full speed, they wouldn't be able to return in an instant. Li Chuanbo, how dare you? Xiao Qinyu roared from afar. Both sides of the battle immediately had a change of mood. The allied forces were naturally overjoyed, but the Li clan side was shocked and even a little disorganized. At this moment, the Li clan already had the full initiative. As long as they persevered a little longer, the allied forces would definitely be forced down the mountain even though they had the advantage in numbers. Even with Diwu Qingrou's flawless command, it definitely couldn't compare to the psychological pressure of this high-level supreme martial artist. But at this delicate moment, Xiao Qinyu and the others actually rushed back. This naturally gave the allied forces a backbone, and their will to resist increased greatly. Diwu Qingrou quietly let out a sigh of relief. Even someone as intelligent as him hadn't thought that things would develop to this point. It was supposed to be a decisive battle. But it had somehow evolved into a battle of gains and losses. In fact, it had even turned into a place where the final battle would take place. He didn't know why Mo Tianji wanted this place, but he wouldn't give it up no matter what. Having ruled over the battlefield for so many years, he could even predict that if this piece of land was given to Mo Tianji, there would definitely be trouble that would be 10 times more troublesome than now. And that trouble at that time he would definitely have to shoulder it himself. Diwu Qingrou didn't want to. He really didn't want to. Now that they had finally persevered until Xiao Qinyu and the others returned, Diwu Qingrou's heart was finally at ease. After all, this place wasn't lost. Although the heavens played tricks on people, people could still triumph over the heavens. Mo Tianji also sighed at this time. At this point it really couldn't be said that he didn't try his best. Originally the heavens were all on his side. Duke Yu must have done his best to bring so many high-level supreme martial artists with him. Any one or two of them would be able to kill him. It was as if he was circling in front of the King of Hell's palace. He would often go to the entrance of the Yellow Springs and return. If this continued, Duke Yu might have died somewhere. This was why he had no choice but to end it. It was a pity that the time he bought wasn't enough. Even if he had just a little more time to catch his breath. Mo Tianji sighed and was about to order the army to retreat. Now the Li clan still had the upper hand. It shouldn't be difficult for them to retreat. But if they waited until Xiao Qinyu and the others returned, then it wouldn't be a matter of whether they retreated or not. It was very likely that the Li clan would announce its demise in advance. However, at this delicate juncture, a faint voice said, "Tribulation has been gone for 10,000 years. Tribulation sword rules the world. Tribulation sword rules the world. Tribulation sword rules the world." The voice was very calm, but the figures of Xiao Qinyu and the others who were running at high speed stopped in an instant. One by one they turned around and looked at the source of the voice. At that place, there seemed to be a little bit of light jumping out suddenly. It was as if it had suddenly appeared from the void, shooting out billions of bright and dazzling lights. Xiao Qinyu's pupils shrank. This was the sword tip of a sword. Looking at this shape, everyone present could recognize it. Behind him, the dozens of supreme martial artist experts were also shocked. They almost couldn't breathe. They only felt that their hearts were beating like drums. Even breathing seemed to be difficult. As long as one wasn't an idiot, they would know that the tip of the sword, coupled with the words spoken just now, was enough to tell that Tribulation Sword had reappeared. The master of Tribulation Sword had returned to the world. The legend of 10,000 years, the mystery of 10,000 years. Today at this moment they could finally see the legendary divine sword. That sword tip was floating in the air, swallowing and spitting out cold light. The sun shone in the sky, but it couldn't suppress the light of the sword tip. It was just a sword, and it was only a small part of the sword tip, but everyone's eyes revealed the most fanatical look. And an unprecedented majestic pressure. That was a supreme divine object. Just a sword tip and everyone's mind was seized. Suddenly, there was a piercingly cold aura flickering, and another object that was flickering with light appeared out of nowhere. The sword blade. The sword tip suddenly rushed to the sky and grew in the wind. It actually became 10 feet long in the air. It was just a little bit of starlight just now, but now it grew hundreds of times, thousands of times in the air. The sword blade followed with a schwa sound. With a flash of light, it was side by side with the sword tip. It stood tall in the air. The cold light seemed to be the blinking eyes of thousands of ghosts in hell. Under the clear blue sky, there was a sense of gloominess that came out of nowhere. Then with a loud sound, the sword blade also appeared. The cold light flashed and everyone felt a chill in their hearts. It was as if a sea of blood and a mountain of corpses had appeared in front of them. It was so tragic. Then it was the sword guard, the sword tongue, the sword hilt, the sword pommel. There were a total of 7 parts of the sword. They circled and danced in the air, each with its own spirit, each with its own power. Then clang. With a clear sound, the sword tip took the lead and rushed to the sky. The sword blade followed, and with a ka sound, it merged with the sword tip. A burst of dazzling light flashed, and a strange feeling of fighting the world side by side arose in everyone's heart. It was as if the sword tip and the sword blade were brothers who had been separated for 10,000 years. Now that they had reunited after a long separation, they were reunited and fighting the world side by side. Clang. The sword blade rose mightily and lit up, joining the sword tip and the sword blade. They merged seamlessly in the air. The sword body had already taken shape. Then, the two sides of the sword guard flew up and embedded into the sword body. The curved arc was just enough to protect the hand holding the sword. It was an awe-inspiring guard. The sword tongue flew up with a schwa sound, and with a seven-colored light, it entered the ranks of the swords. Then, the sword hilt suddenly moved forward, and with a ka sound, it took the sword tongue into its embrace. Then the sword pommel flew up like a meteor. With a ka sound, it appeared in the fixed position. A long sword was thus formed. The moment the sword was formed, it suddenly exploded with thousands of rays of light, standing majestically between heaven and earth. It was as if this calamity sword also knew that it had not appeared in the open on this continent for 10,000 years. This time, it appeared with its head held high and looked down on all eternity, intimidating the masses. It just floated in the air like this, the sword tip pointing straight at the sky. This sword was more than 100 feet long, but it did not give people the feeling that it was too big or inappropriate. That perfect streamline, that ingenious design, made everyone extremely fond of it. However, that awe-inspiring aura that swept through everything made everyone feel fear from the bottom of their hearts. A clear sound rang out, and then a white light like a swimming dragon flew out like lightning. Like a swallow returning to its nest, it actually plunged into the sword body of the calamity sword. Then, the whole sword body shone brighter, and the white light inside could be faintly seen swimming back and forth, as if it was very excited and happy. Calamity sword. Xiao Qinyu was dazzled and muttered, "It's really the calamity sword. This is the calamity sword that has dominated the heavens for 10,000 years. This sword has really reappeared in the world." Everyone stared at the sword in a daze. For a moment, no one responded to Xiao Qinyu's words. This sword had already attracted all of their attention. The one who obtained the calamity sword ruled the world. The one who obtained the calamity sword turned yin and yang. The one who obtained the calamity sword reversed reincarnation. The one who obtained the calamity sword saved the world. All the legends and legends about the calamity sword reverberated in everyone's minds. Calamity sword. A laugh that shook the wind and thunder, a rage that made the sea cold, a hand that broke the firmament, a sword that danced across the sky. If this sword fell into my hands, then the one who could do all this would be me. I am the master of the firmament, I am the master of the earth, I am invincible, I am supreme. Xiao Qinyu looked at the calamity sword, and the intoxication in his eyes gradually disappeared. Slowly, it turned into a cruel look, and he said indifferently, "Since the calamity sword has appeared, is the master of the calamity sword still not willing to come out and meet me?" His voice was not very loud, but it echoed in the air like muffled thunder. The intoxication of all the experts was shattered by this muffled voice, and they were suddenly awakened. Yes, there was still the master of the calamity sword. Chapter 1527. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. They couldn't help but widen their eyes and listen attentively. They wanted to hear what the legendary master of Calamity Sword was going to say. He only heard that detached, indifferent and cold voice say, "Xiao Qinyu, the elderly should cultivate their mind in nature and enjoy the rest of their lives. It's not good to have a hot temper at your age. It's not good for cultivation, heart, lungs, liver, kidneys and spleen." Even with Xiao Qinyu's calmness and cultivation, his body couldn't help but sway a little after hearing this. The supreme martial artists behind him all felt their vision go dark. Did the master of Calamity Sword really say these words? Did the master of Calamity Sword really say these words? This was too shocking. It wasn't that they were shocked by the content, but the nonsense was too shocking. What was even more shocking was that this kind of nonsense could actually be said in such a solemn, indifferent and aloof voice. This was really a realm. Everyone wants to see me? Alright, then I'm coming out. A faint laughter sounded. Everyone held their breaths and waited for the legendary figure to appear. I'm really coming out. The faint laughter sounded again. Everyone's face was filled with black lines. Was a legendary figure really that legendary? I'm really coming out. The faint voice sounded very serious. What the fuck was this legendary figure still breathing? If everyone held their breaths and waited for him. In the end, this guy came out 3 times in a row, but they still didn't see him. Everyone felt that they couldn't hold their breaths anymore and they all spat it out. Everyone looked at each other and realized that the person opposite them had an extremely strange expression. The master of Calamity Sword, who was the center of attention and was almost regarded as a god by the people of the Heaven Realm, was actually so unruly? How could they endure this? Are you coming out or not? Xiao Qinyu couldn't bear it anymore and shouted. Why is the old man's temper so bad? His personality is so impatient. It's hard for him to achieve great things. The voice complained sincerely. Xiao Qinyu almost vomited blood. He wanted to flick his sleeves and leave. Under everyone's expectant gazes, the air in front of them was filled with a dense void. A young man with a jade-like complexion appeared in the void in front of them with a gentle smile on his face. The moment he appeared, he waved his hand. The Calamity Sword in the sky let out a sharp but joyful sword hum. It suddenly shrank and returned to his hand. By the time it reached his palm, it had already returned to the size of an ordinary longsword. The person who came was naturally the master of Calamity Sword, Chuyang. But when Xiao Qinyu and the others really saw him, the strange feeling in their hearts increased by several points. Was this guy here to fight? Or are you here for a vacation? Sightseeing? Could it be that he was actually here to date? The Catastrophe Sword Master who appeared out of nowhere was wearing a white robe like snow. He looked like a handsome tree in the wind. In his arms, there was a beautiful girl who looked like she was in a painting. She was dressed in red, with a face full of love and gentleness. She was nestled in his arms like a little bird. It was as if a peerless flower had suddenly bloomed on this ancient ice field. The moment they saw this girl again, a heartfelt gentleness and pity suddenly rose in their hearts. You are the Catastrophe Sword Master? Yi Xiaoyao seemed to be in disbelief. He finally asked loudly. Keep your voice down. Chuyang looked up at him and said angrily, Don't scare my beauty. Mo Qingwu, who was in his arms, turned her bright eyes and said softly, I'm not a beauty. I'm an ugly monster. Chuyang said, If you are an ugly monster, then I'll look at ugly monsters in the future, okay? The dozens of supreme martial artists on the opposite side were collectively speechless. Everyone was even prepared to see the birth of a peerless hero. Who would have thought that when they opened their eyes wide, they would see a scene of tender love? A talented man and a beautiful woman, a perfect couple. This was the legendary legend? Catastrophe Sword Master? Instantly, everyone felt that they were going to get a needle's eye. It was too confusing. It made them gasp for breath. You are really the Catastrophe Sword Master? This time even Xiao Qinyu felt that he was dreaming. He even omitted the words sir directly. Chuyang raised the Catastrophe Sword in his hand and said with a smile, How can you say this? I can lie, but this sword won't lie, right? If you keep asking the same question like this, I'll feel impatient. Are you used to repeating your questions many times? Has your memory deteriorated to this extent? Xiao Qinyu's chest tightened. He shouted, Catastrophe Sword Master, you killed my brother. You and I are irreconcilable. Chuyang said lightly, I killed your brother, so you want to take revenge on me. I can understand this. But how many people have you killed in the past 10,000 years? How many people have come to take revenge on you? Xiao Qinyu sneered. What's the pity of killing ants? You are indeed the clan master of the Xiao clan. What you said is so good. You said exactly what I wanted to say. Chuyang raised his head lightly and looked at him with some mockery. You said it just now. What's the pity of killing ants? Is it necessary to be irreconcilable with me? You. Xiao Qinyu's eyes shone sharply. He suddenly held the sword hilt and said coldly, Catastrophe Sword Master, you and I have been enemies for generations. If you don't die, then my clan will die. So what if you have a glib tongue? Come, call out all your brothers. I'll be merciful today and send you all on your way. Let's meet in the netherworld so that you won't be lonely. Chuyang smiled lightly. My brothers? Suddenly someone said coldly, Xiao Qinyu, do you want to see me? This voice was so cold that it could freeze one's bones. This voice was so sharp that it could pierce one's heart. A figure in black suddenly appeared. Tall and straight like a sword. His eyes were like a sword, his body was like a sword, his brows were like a sword, and his aura was like a sword. As soon as he appeared, an unprecedentedly strong sword intent suddenly raged and surged, covering the entire sky. Clang. Except for Xiao Qinyu and Chu Yang, as long as there was a sword at their waist, there was no exception. All of them let out a buzzing sound at the same time. So one of the tribulations is a sword supremacy. Amazing. Xiao Qinyu's eyes were solemn. Although the other party's level was not high, only at the peak of 2nd grade, a sword supremacy with such cultivation could already hurt him. Only a sword supremacy? Another voice asked fiercely. The moment this voice sounded, all the people who used sabers felt the scabbard at their waist vibrate, and their sabers were automatically unsheathed by half a foot. Everyone suddenly turned their heads and saw another young man in black standing with his saber horizontally. His feet were firm and unmoving. Although he was standing in the air, he gave everyone the feeling that he was like a lofty mountain that couldn't be shaken at all. Just by standing there, a majestic aura like that of an army of thousands of men and horses was already coming at them. Saber supremacy. You're also one of the tribulations. Xiao Qinyu's eyes narrowed. Dong Wuxiang said coldly, why? Do you want to have a taste of it? Xiao Qinyu sneered, considering your age to have such achievements even if you are not the last, it is unprecedented. However, you alone are not my match. A very serious voice said, Dog Ant. What the fuck, this old thing is so fucking arrogant, so crazy. If you continue to brag, there will be dust. I really can't listen to this anymore. She really couldn't stand it anymore. Wah. Dog Ant. Dog Ant. Such flamboyant and hooligan words, without the slightest bit of solemnity, were suddenly spoken in an extremely solemn tone. Everyone only felt extremely uncomfortable. It was truly too uncomfortable. A young man in a white robe raised his head and raised his nostrils. His hands were clasped behind his back, and he appeared in the air in an extremely pretentious manner. At the sight of this, there was a feeling of, God is the boss, I'm the boss that deserved a beating. He walked step by step until he was in front of Dong Wuxiang. Then he turned around to face Xiao Qinyu. Taking a step forward, he pointed at his own nose and said, Old thing, you must remember, my name is GMO. I was the one who crushed your ant-like little brother to death. I'm worried that he'll be lonely down there, so I want to ask you to accompany him and let you brothers reunite in the Yellow Spring so that he won't be lonely. After being reborn, Second Master Ji's confidence was boundless. At this moment he actually dared to challenge a low-grade supreme martial artist. What was even more infuriating was that he even copied Xiao Qinyu's words just now. He was truly arrogant to the extreme. Xiao Qinyu's face instantly darkened. Before he could reply, a wolf's howl suddenly shook the sky, resounding through the sky and peerlessly mighty. Awoo, awoo, following the wolf's howl, a figure somersaulted 17 or 18 times in the air and appeared on the scene. He put his arm around Ji Mo's shoulder and laughed loudly, looking extremely pleased. His face was asking for a beating and his whole body was asking for a beating. The moment one saw him, they couldn't help but want to stuff a red-hot iron rod into the hole in his butt. He laughed loudly. How can I, Luo Kadi, Second Master Luo, be absent from such a lively scene? All of you quickly pay your respects to Second Master Luo. What are you waiting for? Awoo, a dragon's roar reverberated through the air. A white-robed man appeared out of thin air, and he actually scattered waves of golden light across the sky. He smiled and said, I'm Ao Shiyun. And beside him there was another person. This person was thin and shriveled and seemed to be cowering in fear. That person shrank his neck and said fearfully, I'm Rui Butong. I never fight. Bang. A splendid flower bloomed in the sky. It was magnificent and beautiful. In the middle of the flower there was a young man in white. He was elegant, handsome, and free like a woman. He slowly nodded and said simply, Xie Dan Xiong. Xiao Qinyu rolled his eyes and said, There are still 2 missing. Why don't you all show yourselves? Let me see how heroic and elegant the current generation's robbers are. A gentle voice said, Elder Xiao, you're exaggerating. We seem to have met before. Was Mo Tianji. Something happened some time ago. I wanted a little girl but I couldn't get pregnant. Finally there was news but my wife fell down. My wife has been unhappy all this time. Then, when I saw that my body had recovered, I forced her to go out and play for a week. We went to Suhang. Yes, it's this week. It can be considered as a distraction. I just came back today. I didn't update much during this time. Everyone please forgive me. Now that I'm back, I'll take a rest and seize the time to write to make up for the past few days. Today I'm updating. Chapter 1528. In the distance, Mo Tianji brought Chu Lur and Mo Qingwu over. Chu Lur shouted excitedly, Big brother. She leaped over and hugged Chu Yang tightly. She wanted to pull Mo Qingwu away from her big brother, but in the end she could only hug Mo Qingwu together. The two little girls complemented each other beautifully. Big brother. I missed you so much. You little girl are really whimsical. You actually took advantage of my big brother. The first sentence was directed at Chu Yang, but the second sentence was directed at Mo Qingwu. Mo Qingwu had recovered her memories from her previous life. How could she lower herself to Chu Luer's level? She just smiled gently. There seems to be one missing. Who is the last one? Xiao Qinyu said coldly. Why are we not enough to release your soul? Do you want to try? We can fight you alone. Of course we can fight you together. GMO sneered. Diwu Qingro stood opposite him and looked at Chu Yang with a complicated expression. He said lightly, Brother Chu, so you are the current Tribulation Sword Master. The world-renowned King of Hell Chu is actually the Tribulation Sword Master. This is really shocking. Diwu Qingro had already guessed Chu Yang's true identity, but he didn't say it out loud. Chu Yang naturally knew. He said lightly, Brother Diwu, long time no see. There's one more. Xiao Qinyu said angrily, Where is he? Come out. There was one more person. This was something everyone knew. However, among the brothers, even Mo Tianji didn't know who the other person was. In fact, not only them, but even Chu Yang didn't know who the last person was. He clearly knew that the last person must be by his side, but he didn't know who it was. The identity of the last person would only be revealed after obtaining the 8th fragment of the Tribulation Sword. Before that, even the Tribulation Sword Master didn't know. And this last person was the most important person to the Tribulation Sword Master and his brothers. Chu Yang once thought, could it be Dukyu? Or was it Tan Tan? However, he really wasn't confident and couldn't be sure. The legend of tribulation had lasted for more than 100,000 years. There were countless legends in each generation. Each had their own style and each had their own merits. It was difficult to say, but there were still clues that could be found. Tribulation was an individual in every generation. This was one of the rules. If it were not for tribulation, how could there be a big family in every generation? The second rule was that the Sword Master of Calamity was not part of the Calamity. He was the master of the Calamity, but he was not the leader of the Calamity. The third rule was that the victims of the tribulation would never have the same surname. If they had the same surname, how would the great clans be ranked? How to list them? In addition to the above 3 rules, there was another rule that was not known if it could be counted as a rule. Tribulation had never had a woman. These 4 were secrets that were known to the highest echelons of the aristocratic families. For generations, every generation of great aristocratic families had racked their brains to target the new generation of tribulation every 10,000 years. Unfortunately, they had used all kinds of methods, whether it was conspiracy, coercion, deceit, or beauty traps. It could be said that they had used all kinds of methods, but they were still unable to achieve anything. In the end, they could only be destroyed. Chu Yang was very confused because he didn't know who the remaining person was. Even Chu Yang, the Sword Master of Calamity, did not know the identity of the last person. Naturally, it was impossible for the others to know. In fact, this question had troubled everyone for a long time. So at this moment, when the brothers heard Xiao Qinyu's question, they subconsciously turned their heads and looked at Chu Yang. Chu Yang turned his head innocently and looked at the brothers who were looking at him blankly. Then Mo Tianji turned his head with a very interesting expression. So even Big Brother did not know who the last person was? What a joke. GMO opened his mouth and then closed it. In the end, he did not dare to make a sound. Chu Yang's mind turned quickly. He did not want to be entangled in this question anymore. Then he smiled faintly and looked at Xiao Qinyu again. He said, Why do you care so much about this? Even if you know who the person is, what can you do? However, I can guarantee that the person's surname is not Xiao. Can you be at ease now? Xiao Qinyu laughed wildly. Why do you need to guarantee? I naturally know that the person's surname is not Xiao. You don't need to cover it up. If you cover it up, it is true. I think your last calamity is that Li Xiong too, right? Don't you want to know what I can do after I know who the person is? I will tell you. What can I do? I will also let you, the master of the Calamity Sword, be at ease. At this moment, the calamities have gathered and the master of the Calamity Sword has appeared. Right now, the Northwest is the grandest gathering in 10,000 years. However, this will also save me from the exhaustion of a long journey. I will let all of you be buried here together. Today is the end of the calamity and the end of the master of the Calamity Sword. Then he waved his hand and shouted sternly, Everyone back down. Today I will challenge the master of the Calamity Sword and his Calamity alone. Let's see if the so-called Calamity legend can continue. According to the legends, the combination of Calamity and Calamity is invincible. I want to see how this combination of Calamity and Calamity can be invincible in front of me. At this moment, Xiao Qinyu was domineering and awe-inspiring. He was really like a god. His whole body was shining with endless light. At the same time, an unprecedentedly domineering aura soared into the sky. He looked down at Chu Yang and the others with a cold smile on his face. His right hand slowly stroked the hilt of his sword. His right hand was originally hanging by his waist. However, with such a simple lift and a small movement of slowly placing his hand on the sword hilt, the world suddenly surged with wind and clouds. Everyone seemed to see countless palms and sword hilts at the same time. At the same time they fell. Although Chu Yang and the others were all juniors, and Xiao Qinyu had said very arrogantly that he wanted to challenge the legend of the current generation with his own strength, at this moment, he had undoubtedly used all of his strength. For 100,000 years, the master of the Calamity Sword was equivalent to a legend. And the combination of Calamity and Calamity was an invincible legend. Today Xiao Qinyu wanted to rewrite this legend with his own strength and create a new one. How could he not go all out? The hostile relationship between the two sides was already clear. Seeing that a conflict was about to break out, Chu Yang was about to take a step forward when a white shadow suddenly flashed beside him. Then a red shadow also flashed. It was Mo Qingwu's beautiful figure, like a flowing cloud, floating out. On the other side, Chu Lu stepped forward with her chest puffed out. With a wave of her hand, a silent and dense aura rushed toward Xiao Chen's face. Xiao Qinyu's complexion changed sharply. His entire body moved without any wind, rising more than 10 feet into the air. His movements didn't stop and he quickly retreated another 10 feet. With a wave of his big sleeve, a tyrannical force hit the void in front of him, causing a crisp puff sound. The space in front of him instantly showed signs of shattering, just like a piece of broken glass. Then the entire shattered space was directly sent far away by Xiao Qinyu. After confirming that it was safe, he said in a serious voice, "Poison of the void? You are the successor of the poison doctor?" Previously Wu Jueqing only pointed from afar. The distance was really too far, so Xiao Qinyu actually didn't see what Chu Le looked like at all. To be honest, Chu Le's poison of the void made Xiao Qinyu a little wary, but he didn't fear it. With Xiao Yuchen's cultivation he had too many methods to deal with it easily. But the poison of the void also meant something else, which was that it showed Chu Le's identity as the successor of the poison doctor. Wu Jueqing was watching by the side, so how could Xiao Qinyu dare to act rashly? So what if he had too many methods? If he didn't dare to use them, wouldn't it be a waste? Chu Le's beautiful eyes turned and she smiled sweetly. It is Le. Le is here to ask Elder Xiao for a fight. Xiao Qinyu smiled bitterly. Ask for a fight? My ass, would I dare to ask for a fight with a little poison like you? Just as Xiao Yuchen was about to open his mouth to explain, a red robe suddenly fluttered and a red shadow flashed. Mo Qingwu let out a soft shout and attacked from the air. Her sword floated like a traveler in the world. Wherever the sword passed, a lonely and carefree concept appeared out of nowhere. This sword actually seemed to abandon the world of mortals in an instant. It was full of elegance and aloofness. The lonely and aloofness of the sword went straight for Xiao Qinyu's throat. I'd rather look at a lonely sword at the end of the world than be stained with luxury by the world of mortals. Seeing this, Xiao Qinyu's expression changed again. His figure retreated swiftly like moving clouds and flowing water. A strange light shot out from his eyes as he shouted, "Little girl in red, Ning Tianya Supreme Ning, who is he to you?" Mo Qingwu's sword attack was Ning Tianya's real signature move. If the poison doctor Wu Jueqing was the most untouchable person in the world, then Ning Tianya was the most untouchable person in the world. Mo Qingwu replied indifferently, "He is my teacher." She raised her head and smiled. Qingwu is new in the world, I've made a fool of myself in front of Elder Xiao. Xiao Qinyu's face was a little twisted at this moment. He had long heard that Ning Tianya and Bu Luqing, these two damned but immortal old fellows, had taken in a disciple together and treasured her like a treasure. Previously, he was still curious about what kind of heaven-defying talent could be taken in as a disciple by these two great supreme martial artists at the same time. He didn't expect to finally see it today. He did see it. Her talent was indeed extraordinary. At such a young age, she had already reached the level of a supreme martial artist. Such an achievement couldn't be described as rare and commendable. She was really blessed by the heavens and a genius. But why did she have to stand on the opposite side? Why was this so? The disciple of the poison Dr. Wu Jueqing and the disciple of Ning Tianya and Bu Luqing actually stood on the opposite side together? Wasn't this too much of a scam? Chu Le'er and Imo Qingwu smiled at the same time. They said very humbly and politely, Elder Xiao, you don't have to worry about my teacher. Now that our positions are clear, since we have already confirmed that we are enemies, then it's only natural for us to fight to the death. Please make your move. This sentence was really reasonable. It was really magnanimous and high class, full of the flavor of the world. It was an open-minded demeanor of the people of the world. However, the faces of Xiao Qinyu and the various supreme martial artist experts of the allied forces behind him were completely twisted. What you guys said was simply too nice. What did they mean by, don't have to worry about anything? How could they not have to worry about anything? Not to mention that Wu Jueqing was over there eyeing them covetously. Even if Wu Jueqing wasn't here, they definitely couldn't not worry about anything. Chapter 1529. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. Unless Xiao Qinyu could kill all the people here, be it allies or enemies, the news would definitely spread if he really killed the two girls. Not to mention the enemy, even his own people would definitely betray Xiao Qinyu at the first moment in order to get rid of suspicion. Humans all had the mentality to protect themselves, especially when facing a powerful force that they were powerless to resist and unable to resist. At that time, it was definitely foreseeable that Wu Jueqing, Ning Tianya and Bu Luqing would join hands to kill the Xiao clan in anger. Even for a colossus like the Xiao clan, the outcome was already destined. Not even a complete tile would be left behind. This wasn't the end. With Wu Jueqing around, not even a blade of grass would grow in the Xiao clan's territory for tens of thousands of years. It would turn into a desert in the human world without any vitality, not to mention any inheritance. Under the bloody revenge of 3 top-notch supreme martial artists, the so-called inheritance would be a joke. You two little girls are full of confidence, so of course you don't have to worry. But how can we not worry? As she spoke, Chu Le'er chuckled and her white figure flashed like lightning. Elder Xiao, be careful. She actually made the first move. Imo Qingwu didn't want to fall behind. Her hair danced as if it was flying. She shouted softly, Tianwu, dance heaven and earth. In an instant, red shadows swept across the world like a waterfall. In an instant, it was as if the world had turned crimson red. It was filled with boundless magnificence like a dream. Even though he was in the middle of a battle and was in danger of dying, Chu Yang's heart was inexplicably in a daze at this moment. A wave of emotions arose spontaneously and overflowed his entire heart. Imo Qingwu knew that the opponent was strong, so she immediately used her trump card. Tian Wu's magical martial arts finally appeared in the Chongtian continent for the first time. Xiao Qinyu was also a veteran who had been on the battlefield for a long time. When he saw the strange situation in front of him, he didn't dare to act rashly. He roared and quickly retreated. However, he was surprised to find that his front and back were enveloped by the red shadow. His body was sticky as if it was being pulled by countless silk threads. He couldn't move. Xiao Qinyu was well aware that even though he was trapped in a predicament, there was no real danger. Imo Qingwu's moves were marvelous and indeed exceeded his expectations. However, her cultivation was too low, so she couldn't really trap him. Whether it was brandishing his sword to break out of the encirclement or mustering his strength to struggle, he was confident that he could escape. However, these two methods had the same flaw, which was that he would inevitably hurt Imo Qingwu. With the opponent's magical art, it was really difficult for him to control. Just as Xiao Qinyu was carefully considering how much strength he should use to ensure that he could escape without hurting Imo Qingwu, the attacks of the two girls came one after another. He was very polite, afraid that he would hurt the two girls, but the two girls were very rude. Every move was vicious and deadly, as if they were afraid that they wouldn't be able to hurt him. Just as Xiao Qinyu was temporarily trapped, Chu Le'er's sword had already slashed towards him. At the same time there was a dreamlike flash of red light. Imo Qingwu's dreaming of a gentle dance saber had already turned into a blurry bolt of lightning and slashed towards him. A sharp saber and a sharp sword. At this moment, Xiao Qinyu almost fainted from sullenness. None of these items were ordinary items. Under the situation where his protective upstanding chi couldn't reflect the impact, it definitely couldn't block it. But if it reflected the impact, the two girls would definitely be seriously injured. Then he would still be finished. Not only would he be finished, but the entire Shao clan would be finished as well. However, since Jianghu had already swung her saber to attack, it meant that the connection with the red shadow from before had already weakened. Xiao Qinyu made a prompt decision. With a shout, his body spun like a top, making a sound of space being torn apart. He actually got rid of the red shadow and rushed into the air, temporarily escaping from the danger. Jianghu and Chu Le's figures were like lightning as they hurriedly chased after him, unwilling to let him go. Xiao Qinyu was full of hatred. He had many misgivings and didn't dare to hurt the two girls, but the two girls didn't know when to stop and kept forcing him to kill. It wasn't a good idea to continue like this. At that moment, he made up his mind and decided to use all his strength to quickly restrain the two girls. As long as he had the two girls in his hands, even if those three old farts came looking for him, there would be room to maneuver. Besides, he would only restrain them and definitely wouldn't really hurt the two girls. And that, Tianwu, was really too domineering. With the cultivation of a mid-stage supreme martial artist, the little girl actually almost trapped him, a mid-stage supreme martial artist. This was simply unbelievable. He made up his mind and was about to make a move. However, there was a fluctuation in the air and Wu Jueqing appeared coincidentally. Xiao Qinyu felt as if he had been pardoned. He hurriedly said, "Elder Wu, please stop your disciple." After all, restraining the two girls was the worst plan. If Wu Jueqing were to stop him or even take the two girls away, that would be the best plan. But unexpectedly, Wu Jueqing actually smiled dotingly and said, "Those two girls are too mischievous. They usually don't train properly. It's rare that they are in the mood today. You should play with them a little more. It's also a good thing to gain more combat experience. Let's stop when it's appropriate and not hurt each other." Xiao Qinyu's depressed and inconsolable mood soared up. An urge to curse filled his chest in an instant. What the fuck? What do you mean play? Who would be in the mood to play with them at such a time? You old fart, didn't you see how ruthless you and Ning Tianya's precious disciple were just now? Every saber and sword was aimed at the throat, the heart, the dantian and other vital points. If it weren't for the fact that they were inexperienced and couldn't attend to one thing and lose sight of the other, it would have been either me or the two of them who would have died just now. But now that Wu Jueqing was in front of him himself, no matter how unwilling Xiao Qinyu was, he could only play with the two little girls. For a moment, the three of them actually got into a fight in the air, tossing and turning, fighting to the death. In a real fight to the death, Xiao Qinyu would definitely die and the two girls would naturally live. The only regret was that even though the two girls tried their best, they still couldn't kill the clan head of the Shao clan. The difference in their actual strength was too great. Jianghu Le, stop fooling around. Chu Yang tried hard to hold back his laughter and shouted. The two girls agreed at the same time and very obediently floated back to Chu Yang's side. With the brains of these two girls, they naturally knew that with just the two of them, they definitely wouldn't be able to kill Xiao Qinyu. But they still had to come out and make a fuss to give Chu Yang time and space to maneuver. To let that kind of hostile aura dissipate. Sure enough, after such a fuss, Xiao Qinyu's face turned purple. The momentum of wanting to destroy and recreate a legend in one fell swoop just now was already gone. Even if it was a top-level battle with his cultivation, he might not sweat at all. But at this moment he actually felt a chill on his back. It wasn't because he was tired or scared, but because he was too angry. It was too suffocating. Ever since Xiao Qinyu was born, he hadn't felt so suffocated in more than 10,000 years. Chu Yang took a step forward and said with a smile, "Has Elder Zhao's anger subsided now?" Xiao Qinyu was furious. What the hell? You bastard who still wants to pretend to be obedient after taking advantage of the situation. If you were in my position, would your anger have subsided? But at this moment he couldn't not answer, otherwise he would lose even more of his poise. At once, he said impatiently, "If you have something to say, say it." Chu Yang said indifferently, "Elder Shao is the first clan head of the Shao clan and has seen the world. I believe you should know that my appearance at this moment is very untimely, against common sense and even very unwise. But the reason why I'm here is because some very unexpected changes have happened. It's not without reason. I believe Elder Shao should know this in your heart." Xiao Qinyu didn't answer and only snorted. In fact, he somewhat agreed with Chu Yang's words in his heart. For generations, before the Tribulation Sword Master's wings were fully developed, he could be said to be the public enemy of the big aristocratic families. And being the public enemy of the big aristocratic families was equivalent to being the enemy of the entire upper three heavens. Once exposed, how serious would the consequences be? Although Chu Yang had already reached the supreme grade and in terms of age it was rare to have this kind of strength. But in terms of absolute strength he was still very weak. It wasn't too much to say that he couldn't even withstand a single attack. Xiao Qinyu was naturally not stupid. How could he not know that the other party must have a purpose for revealing his identity in such a big way? Especially when the other party appeared in such a high-profile manner and provoked the highest degree of hatred from him. Then he let the two little girls take advantage of the situation to suppress him. This was originally a very deep intention. The whole process could be said to be unexpected, but it was not necessarily unreasonable. Xiao Qinyu snorted coldly and asked sarcastically, "Tribulation Sword Master's methods are extremely brilliant. He even used Ning Qinya, Bu Luqing and Wu Jueqing's disciples as protective talismans to suppress us. At this moment you're telling me that an accident has happened? I'm also interested to know what exactly happened. What can make you, the Tribulation Sword Master, appear and announce to the world?" Chu Yang ignored Xiao Qinyu's sarcasm and said lightly, "We need a relatively calm environment to talk. That's all." Xiao Qinyu snorted coldly. "Our environment to talk? What kind of environment to talk between us?" Chu Yang's gaze focused and his voice became serious. He said very seriously, "This is also my sincerity. After you and I talk, if Elder Xiao still wants to continue the battle, I can promise that Lur and Jianghu will not participate, and will not use any means to interfere in the battle between us." Xiao Qinyu's eyes flashed and he said, "Well, you've already said so much. If I still hesitate, it would be ungentlemanly of me. Go ahead." Regarding this promise, Xiao Qinyu was undoubtedly very moved. If the two little girls really didn't interfere, he naturally wouldn't have any grievances anymore. In fact, Xiao Qinyu also knew that even if Chu Lur and Imo Qingwu were to participate in the battle, they might not be of much use. As long as two experts who were far stronger than them were to deal with the two girls, it would be difficult for the two girls to do anything. Also, Chu Yang's side might also be worried about the safety of the two girls. In such a battle, even a god couldn't guarantee that there wouldn't be any accidents. If the two girls' opponents were really forced by the two girls to kill them, Chu Yang wouldn't even be able to buy medicine for regret. Chapter 2. I continue to write the third chapter. Chapter 1530. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation Supplement. Although the power of the Calamity Sword was vast and the heavy core could heal all injuries, it still couldn't be compared to the medicine of regret. However, after weighing both sides, Xiao Qinyu still felt that his side was at an advantage. As long as he could avoid becoming enemies with those three old bastards, this price was still worth it. And in fact it was indeed so. After all, no one could guarantee that the two girls wouldn't be hurt at all. Chu Yang said seriously, "Senior, you must still remember the sudden appearance of the black fog a few days ago." Xiao Qinyu said, "So what if I remember?" Chu Yang took a deep breath and said, "Nothing much. It's just that the black fog had darkened the entire sky. I can conclude that it's a unique trace of the extraterrestrial demon's descent to the lower world. In other words, a great calamity is about to befall the Chongtian continent. This is an unavoidable world-ending calamity. I believe that even if we combine all our forces, we may not be able to avert the danger. That's all." "What are you saying? Nothing much? It's already the great calamity, and you're still saying that's all? You're really fucking calm." Hearing this, the experts of the big clans were a little conflicted. Xiao Qinyu frowned and muttered to himself, "Great calamity of the world? Extraterrestrial demons? Coming down?" As a peak-grade supreme martial artist and the first clan master of the Xiao clan, Xiao Qinyu naturally knew that the so-called extraterrestrial demons were definitely not just a legend. Although he had never seen it before, it did exist. Chu Yang said, "That's right. This is the calamity of the entire heavenly realm. At such a critical moment, if we still fight for our own interests, I'm afraid, we'll all be destroyed. That's our final outcome. That's why I'm willing to take the risk, to show up in advance." Chu Yang said seriously, "I believe that Senior Xiao should be able to feel my sincerity. It's indeed very sincere. I can feel the sincerity of the Calamity Sword Master." Xiao Qinyu was also an old monster who had lived for tens of thousands of years. Naturally, he wasn't someone who didn't know the severity of the matter. Since Chu Yang had already made a gesture and fully expressed his sincerity, then Xiao Qinyu naturally had no reason to doubt the authenticity of this matter. Xiao Qinyu looked up at the sky. After a moment of silence, he said lightly, "I don't doubt the Calamity Sword Master's words. I also understand the harm that the extraterrestrial demons can cause. Chu Yang nodded. Xiao Qinyu took a few deep breaths. Suddenly, the expression in his eyes turned cold. He said with some pain, "But I can't join hands with you." Chu Yang was surprised. What? The old man in front of him was absolutely not an impulsive person. With his experience, wisdom, and insight into the ways of the world, he shouldn't have thought that this was an excellent opportunity to protect the future of the Xiao clan, so how could he refuse it so decisively? Xiao Qinyu faced the sky and let out a long howl with complicated emotions. He said sternly, "Because of my younger brother. Because you are the master of Calamity Sword. Because of your destiny. Because we are natural enemies. They are natural enemies that cannot coexist." Xiao Qinyu's voice was solemn. "I don't doubt your intentions. I don't doubt it at all. I also admire your choice. I absolutely believe that you are making a sacrifice for the sake of the common people. You don't have any selfish motives. You are indeed worthy of being the master of Calamity Sword. But I understand. If other people or other aristocratic families choose to cooperate with you in the end, I won't oppose or stop them. But I, Xiao Qinyu, will definitely fight you to the death." Xiao Qinyu looked up to the sky and let out a long howl. He sounded like he was crying and laughing at the same time. "I must avenge my younger brother. I must protect my clan from being destroyed by calamity. As for the common people of the world, what does it have to do with me whether they are destroyed or not?" Behind Xiao Qinyu, a few supreme martial artists lowered their heads and pondered. But most of the people started to clamor at once. Old Xiao is right. Is this master of Calamity Sword out of his mind? He actually used such an excuse to deceive us. Yes. As long as the master of Calamity Sword and Calamity are killed one by one, the world will be peaceful. Extraterrestrial demons? What are those? Even if they really come, so what? Everyone will be drowned by their saliva. It's purely an alarmist talk. It's actually a disaster for the entire heavens? Earth-ending catastrophe? Can his words be more ridiculous? Energy, wood, and energy? Anyone with a discerning eye can tell that this is just a stalling tactic by the master of Calamity Sword. He wants us to cooperate with him and then kill us all. Everyone, don't be fooled. What common people of the world? Earth-ending catastrophe? What does it matter if they are alive or dead? You actually used such a high-sounding excuse to deceive us. Master of Calamity Sword, your shamelessness is really without a limit. Everyone, don't be fooled by him. As long as we kill him, everything will be fine." Everyone started to clamor. Chu Yang kept a slight smile on his face as if he didn't hear these insults at all. But the look in the depths of his eyes became colder and colder. Mo Qinji's face was also full of calmness. But that calmness was a little cruel. The rest of the brothers of Calamity Sword were all furious. They tried their best to restrain themselves. Right now their boss was still talking, but it wasn't a good time to talk or fight. Everyone here is from the big dominating clans. You have ruled this continent for 10,000 years. Are the common people of this world so worthless and emotionless in your eyes? How can you be so disdainful? Mo Qinji's eyes flashed with an indescribable look. Yi Xiaoyao sneered. Value? Emotionality? What a joke. Our big clans are all high and mighty. We look down on the world from the clouds. Can't we live without the common people in the world? He's just an ant, how can he be hurt? Mo Qinji said indifferently, if so, you still want to go against us like this? Fight on? Until we meet in life and death? Laughter came from the opposite side. Yes, it was indeed too ridiculous. Whether there were heavenly demons or not, what Mo Qinji, the brain of Calamity Sword, and Chu Yang, the master of Calamity Sword, did today was really a bit ridiculous. Boss, they have made their choice. What do you think? Mo Qinji turned around and asked Chu Yang. Chu Yang nodded deeply. Yes. So, we will fight tomorrow morning. Mo Qinji's voice was cold. Everyone, since you don't want to control the future of this world, you can only leave everything to fate. The winner will be the king and the loser will be the bandit. After this battle, it will be clear who is the winner and who is the loser. Boss, what you did today is simply. At night in the tent. GMO, who had been holding it in for a long time, finally couldn't help but start to talk nonsense. He had been holding it in for a long time. I also feel that it's a bit abrupt. Luo Kadi also didn't understand Chu Yang's actions. In fact, the others also felt the same way. But they knew that Chu Yang definitely had his reasons for doing so. So, they all restrained themselves. Shut up for me. Mo Tianji roared, you two idiots. I really don't know what to say about you two. Do you not have brains or do you have mold in your brains? Why are you so different from normal people? Emo Chinji had been having a hard time these few days. He had nowhere to vent his anger. GMO and Luo Kadi had become his punching bag. Gu Duxing seemed to have understood something. He said hesitantly, Could it be what? Boss, you did this for our own good. Emo Chinji smiled confidently. Including not letting Qingwu and Lure participate in the battle. That's also the reason. Qingwu and Lure will participate in the battle. Although the other party has many misgivings, do you think we don't have any misgivings? Once you're in a killing frenzy on the battlefield, who cares about your background? Even if you're sure that they won't hurt Qingwu and Lure, would you feel good about relying on two little girls to restrain the enemy? Anyway, At this point, 4 pairs of eyes suddenly glared angrily at Emo Tianji. Emo Qingwu and Chu Lur opened their mouths and glared at him. What did you say? Who's a little girl? Do you think you're so great? Ah. Cough cough cough. Cough cough. Emo Tianji was sweating profusely. He didn't dare to look at the 2 girls. These 2 little girls, angering one of them was already enough for him. Angering 2 at the same time, Chu Yang coughed a few times and pulled the 2 girls into his arms. He said, Tianji doesn't mean any harm. Let him finish. The 2 girls pouted at the same time. Emo Tianji looked at Chu Yang with eyes full of jealousy and gratitude. Then he continued, Actually, the reason why Big Brother wants to do this today is because he sincerely wants to join forces with them to fight against the extraterrestrial demons. However, we also know that it's impossible to succeed. Yet we still want to give it a try. If the clans can let down their guard and put the common people's lives first, it'll naturally be the best. However, we all know that the chances of them accepting this are too slim. Since you know that the chances are slim, why do you want to make a futile attempt? Rui Badong asked curiously. Idiot. Emo Tianji's lecturing aura had already been suppressed by Emo Qingwu and Chu Lu. However, Rui Butong's question brought out his emotions again. Instantly, his aura soared and he was insufferably arrogant. GMO and Luo Kadi looked at Rui Badong with grievance. They wished they could beat this guy up. Can't you just let him finish his nagging? How much more scolding would we have to endure with this one sentence of yours? That's because the final battle is about to begin. We will participate in it from beginning to end. After this battle we won't have any free time. We will definitely kill our way through mountains of corpses and seas of blood. Emo Tianji yelled angrily. How many people will we kill along the way? How many people are there in the big clans? Are these people innocent? Are there any wrongdoings? Can you all live with it? If we continue to kill blindly, how many inner demons will we add in the end? How big of an impact will this have on our future path? Have you thought about it? But now, Big Brother is standing on the side of righteousness. If they don't agree, it's because they are crazy. It's because they don't see the big picture. It's because of their selfishness that they see all living beings as ants and have abandoned the common people. On this basis, if they still want to make things difficult for us in a life and death battle, even if we kill them all, what impact will it have on our state of mind? It will instead become a kind of merit. Chapter 1531. Do you understand? Emo Tianji roared. We understand, we really understand. GMO hurriedly wiped the spittle on his face. He was very sad, very depressed, and very aggrieved. He was even more aggrieved than he was during the day. For tomorrow's decisive battle, we will have to rely on Commander-in-Chief Diwu. Xiao Qinyu still had some embarrassment on his face. Diwu Qingro nodded slightly and said, Qingro will try his best to deal with them. Today's matter happened a little suddenly. The whole thing was an accident. Xiao Qinyu said, Please don't blame me, Commander-in-Chief Diwu. Regarding today's matter, Xiao Qinyu was indeed a little embarrassed. After all, he and the others ignored the battle situation and chased after the treasure. It could be said that he left Diwu Qingro with a mess that was almost impossible to clean up. However, Diwu Qingro managed to persevere in this mess. He even persevered until Xiao Chen and the others came back. However, Xiao Chen and the others still ignored the danger in front of them and blindly chased after the treasure, causing the battle situation to be completely out of control. The fact that they were not defeated because of this was already a great contribution by Diwu Qingro. The clans were already very grateful. If that was really the case, the allied forces besieging the Li clan would be defeated by the enemy before the decisive battle. That would really be a joke for eternity. As for Xiao Chen himself, he would definitely become the biggest joke and leave his name in history. But understanding was one thing. If this happened again, Xiao Qinyu really couldn't be sure that he wouldn't chase after them again. Everyone could talk about the principle, but how many people could really do it? Diwu Qingro nodded to show that he understood and said, "It's okay. Qingro can understand the choice of the elders. That is a great temptation for us martial artists. It's really hard to resist that temptation." Xiao Qinyu saw that Diwu Qingro spoke from the bottom of his heart and also praised him in his heart. After encountering such a thing, he could still accept it without changing his expression and be so calm. Throughout his 10,000 years of life, he really had never seen someone like him. Diwu Qingro smiled faintly and lowered his head respectfully. He thought to himself, "You guys from the big clans are like this. Even if I blame you, what can I do to you? At the end of the day, you're just looking for trouble for yourselves. You guys are nothing more than my tools. I'm using you guys to fight Tianji so that I can live up to my expectations. That's all. It's just that I'm unlucky and have no choice but to choose you." But since he had already made his choice, he had to bear the consequences. "Regardless of whether you obey my orders in the future or not, I will fight this battle to the end. Since that's the case, why should I be angry?" Was he really asking for it? The next morning. The morning sun had not yet fully risen, and the curtains of the great battle had already been drawn with a miserable cry. The ambush that Tianji had set up had finally begun to take action. The first person to make a move was none other than Li Ju. This layer of snow didn't look any different from the other layers of snow, but the difference was like heaven and earth. This was a layer of snow formed after the previous landslide. Because countless boulders had rolled down with the landslide, this area was densely covered in snow. Without a doubt, it formed a natural cover. Because of the effect of the three-light array, as long as a rock came into contact with the mountain, it would immediately become an inseparable part of the mountain under the influence of the array. It could be said to be a natural cover. Before the great battle had even begun, Tianji had already made a lot of preparations on the surface. He had also informed the Li clan of this early on. After the 4 teams of the Li clan entered the layer of snow, they who were familiar with the terrain naturally went into hiding and quietly waited for the right moment to deliver the fatal blow. Under the layer of snow, there was a cave that had been dug in advance. Once the three-light array was formed, the cave became an indestructible base. As for the Li clan members, after they entered the underground, they immediately found a large boulder that had rolled down from the mountain and pressed the boulder down. In front of such an expert, the accumulated snow along the way was completely unable to stop them as they reached the underground. This was equivalent to using the connection between the boulders to fix this layer of snow here. Some of the boulders that were useful for ambushes stopped when they were just a little bit away from the ground. Then they went into the cave. The boulders hung in the air just a few feet away from touching the ground. This formed an exceptionally hidden cover. If they encountered any danger, they just had to drag the boulders down and touch the ground. Therefore, the boulders that could be crushed with a pinch a moment ago had now become something that even deities would find hard to destroy. Tianji had made all these arrangements in advance. It could be said that he had already made the best use of the terrain here. As long as all the experts of the Li clan operated like this, it would not be too rare for them to win against the many and defeat the strong with the weak. Not to mention the other layers of backup plans. The experts of the allied forces naturally did not know that the experts of the Li clan were all in hiding. It was even more impossible for them to know the secret under this layer of snow. Previously, there was once a supreme martial artist who tried to lift up the entire layer of snow with both hands. But they did not expect that the cultivation that could move mountains and fill seas would be completely useless in this layer of snow. This discovery caused the experts of the Alliance army to feel anxious, as if they were treading on thin ice. They could only obey the order and slowly advance under this layer of snow, hiding quietly. Over the course of a day and a night, countless experts of the coalition army had been wandering around every hole where the Li family was hiding. But the Li clan members did not move at all. They were only waiting for Tianji's order to attack and give the enemy a heavy blow. However, this attack, which should have been the most effective, was ruined by their own people. Just like how Xiao Qinyu and the others ignored the big picture and went out of control because of the temptation of external benefits, this time, it was the Li clan's turn to spoil the whole pot of porridge. The heavens did not completely care for Brother Jia. At least, they did not really care for the Li clan. Li Ju finally could not bear it anymore. This kind of natural disgust and jealousy towards people who were better than him made this arrogant Li clan Grand Duke much less patient than others. When he saw the 2 experts of the allied forces go past the hole he was hiding in, Li Ju's desire to perform suddenly became uncontrollable and unstoppable. The enemies in front of him were completely unprepared. One strike was enough to kill them. Why did he have to wait so rigidly for Mo Tianji's order? Could it be that his eyes were able to see what was going on underground from above? Was he so powerful? Thus, Li Ju silently slipped out of his hiding place. The two short swords in his hands silently cut off the necks of the two men from behind. This wonderful taste of a fatal attack was simply too good. Two experts who weren't any weaker than him had silently lost their lives under his sneak attack. Li Ju almost looked up to the sky and let out a long howl. But then a buzzing sound was heard as if someone was crying and complaining. Li Ju's face instantly turned pale. The two dead supreme martial artists had made a strange sound. As a direct descendant of a big clan, how could Li Ju not know this sound? That was supreme martial artist death. The so-called supreme martial artist death was made of a special heavenly sound metal. When worn, as long as one's body still had breath of life, even if it was only a little bit, it would still not make a sound. But once a person died, his breath of life would naturally disappear. Then this supreme martial artist death would make a strange sound similar to crying. Normally the big clans would wear it on their important people. But no one thought that Diwu Qingro would equip these people with such important things. In fact, one only needed to think about it to understand that Diwu Qingro would not equip them under the dark layer of snow. The lower the level of a martial artist, the easier it was to be killed. But once killed, the enemy's hiding place would be exposed. Especially in such a situation where the enemy was in the open and they were in the dark, it was reasonable to equip them with such things. Whoosh! A sound was heard from afar. Then the pressure of the snow suddenly increased. Li Ju carefully retreated to his hiding place. The target is over there. A voice was heard. It had already discovered this place. Voices were also heard from the opposite side. It was too late to return to the cave. Li Ju panicked. He turned around and ran to one side. His family members were hiding there. He would be much safer with the experts of his clan. Everyone, go and catch the one who is running away. An angry voice was heard. He is the murderer. Lu Lao San and Ma Jun are finished. With a swoosh, several people rushed over and struck out with their palms in the air. Even though they were underground, there was a clear sound of air exploding. Wherever it passed, the snow melted rapidly. Li Ju had grown up in the northwest. It could be said that he had been dealing with ice and snow all year round. Naturally, he knew all kinds of changes under the snow like the back of his hand. How to move under the snow at high speed was his specialty. Of course, he was not the only one. Every member of the Li clan was like this. Compared to the allied forces, he was like a fish in water. Even though his strength was weak, he had an absolute advantage in speed. This had undoubtedly become his strongest means to deal with the enemy. He suddenly turned around and glided in the snow. In a flash, he had already arrived behind a fixed big rock. Then his whole body disappeared as if he had disappeared into thin air. The powerful and domineering supreme chi hit the big rock with a boom, and made an explosive sound, but it didn't even shake off the rock. The three-light array could turn a rock into an immortal. Its overbearing power was evident. Idiot! Don't hit the rock. It's useless. Hit it. A supreme master said angrily. Chapter 1532. Li Ju was lucky to escape, but unexpectedly, another person flew over from the other side. Coincidentally, just before Li Ju was about to flash into another cave, he stopped him. Li Ju was shocked. He turned around and ran. However, the force he exerted earlier had completely exposed the cave. In fact, in the current situation, if Li Ju didn't panic, he could definitely protect the hidden cave. Although there was a certain risk, with Li Ju's movement advantage in the snow, he might be able to escape unscathed. However, he panicked and didn't know where to go. Naturally, he exposed everything that could be exposed and couldn't be exposed. As the saying goes, one man rises and one man destroys a country. That was it. There's a cave here. How sharp was a supreme martial artist's vision? Especially in this kind of situation, he was naturally on high alert, extremely careful, and extremely cautious. He had already discovered something fishy. He shouted, "There must be enemies inside. Everyone come quickly. Trap them. Chase that little one. Don't kill him with one blow. Force him to reveal the location of the ambush." Another supreme martial artist immediately realized. This must be the Li clan's secret ambush. Everyone pay attention. As long as you find a place similar to a cave, seal it immediately. Once you confirm that it's the enemy's nest, gather your strength and kill the people inside. Let's close the door and beat the dog. Don't give them a chance to escape. Ambush? Let's bury ourselves in the gates of hell. Yes. Li Ju ran for his life in panic. At this moment he really regretted it. Wouldn't it be better if he just stayed there obediently? Why did he have to show off? Now it's over. He didn't make any contributions. Instead, he exposed the Li clan's ambush. At this moment, there were countless supreme martial artists of the allied army surrounding him from 3 directions behind him. If Li Ju didn't want to die now, he had to escape. When people were in danger, they often panicked and didn't know where to go. They would only choose the path they were most familiar with to escape. This was human instinct. As long as they were normal people, they would be controlled by this instinct. This was especially true for those who were selfish and self-centered. This instinct was even more obvious. And Li Ju, without a doubt, was definitely a selfish person. Even if it was just to live a little longer, he could sacrifice anyone in exchange for a chance to live. This was Li Ju. Therefore, the Alliance Army's wish was successfully achieved. As he fled, more and more of the Li family's ambush locations were exposed. The Alliance Army already had an absolute advantage in terms of numbers. And because of the geographical advantage, it was a situation of closing the door and beating the dog. How could he not destroy them one by one at a time? The most tragic thing was that the originally indestructible environment formed by the Three Lights Great Formation had instead become the sturdiest cage at this moment. As long as a situation was formed, the Li clan wouldn't even have the chance to retaliate and would be directly killed by the combined palm force of a large number of supreme martial artists. In the end, the situation became worse and worse. The Li clan's men had no choice but to come out of the cave and participate in the battle, because they would be exposed sooner or later. If he stayed inside, he would only be waiting for death. He might as well take the initiative to show himself and fight to the death. As long as they heard that Li Ju was being chased and approached, they could only come out and fight. Otherwise they could only wait for death. The battle of annihilation and counter-annihilation under the snow. After a day and night of silence, it had actually played out in such a tragic, comical, and even helpless manner. With such a grandson, if the Li family could survive, that would be a truly rare thing. Mo Qinji had racked his brains and used all his means to set up a seamless ambush. The excellent terrain that he had painstakingly created had completely collapsed just because of such a person. It was not only the allied forces that had pig-like teammates. The Li clan also had them. Even if there was only one of them, it was enough to cause the perfect plan to collapse. The ghost calculator's wheel, because of this piece of trash, had completely collapsed. There were constantly Li clan members who were closed and beaten, or who took the initiative to show themselves, fight and die. There were also constant cheers from the Alliance Army. If Li Ju could restrain himself and not move, when the final battle started, this hidden chess piece would definitely be an extremely powerful force that could play an unimaginably powerful role. Because it was impossible for the Alliance Army to discover them at all. With one in the light and one in the dark, the advantage was undoubtedly overwhelming. But now, at this moment, everything had gone down the drain. The more Li Ju fled, the more chaotic he became. In the end, his mind was completely scattered, and he was simply fleeing based on his instincts. He had no sense of direction at all. The few supreme martial artists who had been chasing behind the Alliance Army could have taken him down long ago, but they didn't. They only occasionally interfered with him, using the threat of their lives to force him to create greater results. When many Li clan members who were forced to come out and fight saw such a situation, they all sighed miserably. All along, as the number one person of this generation of the Li clan and the young master of the clan, Li Ju could be said to be dignified and elegant. No matter what he did, he always looked like he had a card up his sleeve, strategizing and strategizing. But who would have thought that this young master of the clan, who had once been entrusted with high hopes by the clan, who was almost confirmed to be the first successor, would actually be so unbearable in the face of such a life-and-death crisis? Not only did he have no determination and no plan, he even implicated others, his compatriots and the entire Li clan. It was really better for him to die. It wasn't that no one from the Li clan wanted to kill Li Ju right away, but Li Ju was very popular now. The Alliance Army even specially sent several top experts to surround Li Ju at a place slightly further away from him. As long as someone from the Li clan approached, they would immediately kill him. So far, at least 3 to 4 waves of Li clan members who wanted to kill Li Ju and cut off all future troubles were ambushed. In an extremely short period of time, there were already more than 200 Li clan members who were forced to come out and fight. This was already the strength of 2 small teams. According to Mo Tianji's plan, these people had to destroy at least 400 people of the Alliance Army before it would be their turn to be annihilated. But now, they were already facing total annihilation without getting anything out of it at all. Almost half of them were directly killed by the Alliance army and sacrificed without any value. Is the Li clan really doomed? A supreme martial artist of the Li clan wanted to kill Li Ju but was attacked by several people instead. He howled sorrowfully at the sky, blood spurting from his mouth as he fell to the ground and died with hatred in his heart. The Li clan really was doomed. Not for other reasons, but even if the Li clan hadn't encountered such a crisis of annihilation, as long as the clan's business was passed to Li Ju's hands, by the time he had power in his hands, and looking at their current performance, the annihilation of the Li clan was definitely inevitable. Inform the higher-ups immediately. Li Tongtian dealt with the attacks of the few supreme martial artists of the Alliance army in a flurry. Blood spurted from his mouth and his eyes were wide open. Hurry! If the higher-ups don't know about the changes below and continue to act according to the original plan, something big is going to happen. It's no longer necessary. Li Tongtian's fierce roar was like a heart-wrenching cry of blood. Kill them at full speed. A high-level supreme martial artist of the Alliance army gave the order at the same time. We must not let anyone from the Li clan rush to the snow surface. Victory now is equivalent to laying the foundation for the final battle in the future. Let's work together and accomplish this. All the Alliance army started to risk their lives at the same time, increasing the pressure even more. This place was 10,000 feet below the snow layer. If a supreme martial artist's voice could travel 100 miles in a spacious place, then in such an environment, it couldn't even travel a distance of 5 miles. Even supreme martial artists were no exception. The 10,000 feet of snow layer was a natural obstacle in the first place. Be it to light, sound, or power, everyone from the Li clan tried their best to break out of the encirclement with bloodshot eyes, trying their best to rush to the surface. However, in the face of the opponent's tide-like attacks, not a single one of them was able to successfully break out of the encirclement. There were even some who risked their lives and exchanged injuries for injuries. They rushed up 1,000 feet without a care for anything else, only to have their legs chopped off by the people below instead. If they wanted to rush up, they would have to pay a high price. This price had already exceeded the limits of what the Li clan could afford. There was nothing they could do. This was especially so under this layer of snow where one couldn't see anything. An absolute geographical advantage could also become the most fatal obstacle. This was exactly the case right now. And all these losses that could have been completely avoided just because of one person's stupidity had now become completely unavoidable. The enemy only needed to leave a portion of their men to guard high up in the sky. Then, the moment they rushed up without a care for anything else, they would have already been chopped into two. Even if it wasn't as easy as flipping one's hand, it wasn't much harder than drinking plain water. Why? My Li clan. My Li clan. My clan. Li Tongtian roared into the sky, his eyes filled with blood and tears. Blood and pieces of his internal organs spurted out together with his voice. A bright blade suddenly slashed across. Li Tongtian's head flew up from the snow layer, but he still shouted his last sentence at the top of his voice. My clan, kill. Such a heaven-sent opportunity is hard to come by. It can be seen that the destruction of the Li clan is the will of the heavens. Even a tribulation can't reverse it. A supreme martial artist of the Yi clan shouted crazily, everyone attack with all your might and kill all these people. The world below the layer of snow is ours. Once the battle breaks out above, this place will become a paradise for our ambush. A place of victory. Li Ju fled for his life in a panic. At this moment, he was so flustered that he even forgot about the heart of different bodies that his father, Li Wubua, had set up for him. His mind was filled with only escape. Escape. What he didn't know was that the Allied forces wouldn't kill him at all. They would even try their best to protect him and expose more of the Li clan's ambush points. The ones who were really desperate to get rid of him were the people from the Li clan, everyone in the Li clan. This included his father, the person who had originally loved and valued him the most. Li Wubua, who had been silently observing and listening to everything in a hidden cave all this while, sighed. His own son was actually so useless. With such a temperament, how could he be qualified to become one of the tribulations? His thoughts back then were really extremely laughable. The previous chapter was uploaded before 8 o'clock and I forgot to publish it. I thought that it had already been published, so I hurriedly wrote this chapter. In the end, I only realized that the previous chapter was still there when I uploaded this chapter. What the fuck? Please forgive me. Chapter 1533. Li Wubua let out a tragic laugh. He paid close attention to all the movements outside. When he noticed that the sounds of the pursuit were gradually getting further and further away, he abruptly dashed out. He chose not to participate in any battle, nor did he care about his treasures. Instead, he climbed upwards like a swimming fish. Li Wubua's action was not to escape like Li Ju but to deliver a message. The huge change in the snow had to be notified to the higher-ups as soon as possible. Otherwise, not only would the sacrifice of this batch of Li clan members be in vain, it would also seriously affect the future arrangements. It might even lock them into a dead end with no room for maneuver. There was no doubt that Li Wubua's heart was filled with resentment, viciousness, and schemes. But at this moment, the decision made by the current clan leader of the Li clan was still for the clan, because they were from the Li clan. As a father and a younger brother of the Li clan, he had to make up for his son's loss. Li Wubua's body slid upwards stealthily. His speed was relatively not fast. He was completely indifferent to everything else. In fact, not far away there were 2 Li clan members who were currently being besieged. With his strength he could definitely rescue them easily. Yet he completely ignored them. He only made use of whatever concealment he could find to break through upwards. Li Wubua had his own plans for what was more important. In the blink of an eye, he had already climbed up more than 2,000 feet. Over there, someone is going up there. A supreme martial artist from the Allied forces who was in the middle of a battle heard that there seemed to be movement behind him. Out of caution, he casually sliced through the snow with his saber and attacked the source of the movement, Li Wubua. Li Wubua blocked it with his sword. With a clang, he borrowed the momentum of the saber and flew upwards at full speed. Previously, he did not dare to make too much of a commotion and could only go up slowly. Now that his whereabouts were exposed, he might as well go up at full speed and try his best to break through the snow. As long as he could reach the top, or even if he could just let out a shout, it might bring about a chance of turning the situation around. This shout, which was filled with vigilance, immediately attracted countless experts from the Allied forces from all directions. There were even some who started to charge upwards without regard for anything. There was no lack of high-level supreme martial artists among them. Once the Li clan members rushed out and let the higher-ups know about the change below, it would not be a complete victory. At least, they would not be able to achieve the stunning effect of a surprise attack. Mo Tianji, the strategist of this calamity, would certainly make a corresponding strategic change. At that time, it would be another matter if they still wanted to take advantage of him. On the other hand, Li Wubua didn't entangle himself with any enemy at all. He didn't even respond to any of his opponent's attacks. No matter what kind of attack it was, he just blindly borrowed it as an upward force. However, the price he had to pay for this was extremely tragic. In the blink of an eye, his body was already dripping with blood and flesh. His external injuries were so heavy that one could imagine his internal injuries. One must know that the attacks that came from all directions were mainly palm chi and fist chi. However, he still stubbornly charged upwards. At this moment, his speed of ascension had already reached its peak. There was still a space of 300 feet above the snow layer here. Li Wubua's countenance was mournful. At this moment, he unleashed the last of his remaining energy and charged upwards rapidly. This charge seemed to have gathered all of his strength. His entire body flew upwards like a cannonball. A saber flew towards him at lightning speed. Its target was originally his neck, but Li Wubua's upper body had already charged over in an instant. In that instant, Li Wubua only felt a chill in his knees and his body inexplicably lightened. Half of his body finally succeeded in charging out of the snow layer. Li Wubua's 2 legs rushed out like a waterfall of blood. It looked as if he was using his blood as the momentum to push himself up. Just as he breathed in the air outside, Li Wubua already couldn't wait to yell at the sky. The ambush below has been broken. Our side has suffered a crushing defeat. The ambush below has been broken. He had no choice but to do so, because Li Wubua wasn't sure how long more he could live. Perhaps in the next instant, his soul would have already left his body. However, the news must be sent out. It must be sent out. It must be sent out at the first instant. In the quiet snowy plains, his furious roar reverberated far and wide, reverberating in all directions. The surrounding snow layer cracked open. A few supreme martial artists from the Allied forces also jumped out. Sabers and swords were drawn, slashing down on his body like snowflakes. Every move was fatal and fatal. Li Wubua didn't dodge at all. It wasn't because his legs were crippled, nor was it because he didn't have the strength to struggle. Instead, it was because he was afraid that once he resisted or dodged, he would exhaust his remaining strength. It would be a real disaster if his family couldn't hear him. At this moment, as long as his family could hear him, what was this crippled life of his worth? In the forest of sabers and rain of swords that were filled with despair and killing, blood splattered everywhere. Li Wubo looked up at the sky and cried out the last words of his life. The ambush below has been broken. Amo Tianji. Amo Tianji. Did you hear that? Elder Master. Unfortunately, before he could finish his words and before Yu Yin could reply, Li Wubo's body turned into a pile of minced meat amidst a series of puffing sounds. A supreme martial artist from the allied forces was filled with hatred. He raised his leg and kicked his only intact head, sending it flying into the air and landing thousands of feet away. Li Wubo had been scheming and scheming all his life. He had been shameless and despicable all his life. However, at his last moment how could one judge the merits and demerits of a person's life? No matter what, it was really impossible to make a final conclusion. At this moment, Chu Yang and the others had already returned to their respective ambush spots. Amo Tianji was discussing some details with Li Chuanbo. Everything had already been planned and discussed. They were only waiting for the final battle to begin. The so-called discussion now was just to strive for perfection. No matter what was discussed, it wouldn't have much of an impact on the final outcome. However, at this moment, a heart-wrenching scream suddenly rang out. Although the volume wasn't loud, it could still be heard clearly. There was an indescribable sense of grief, helplessness, as well as a sense of regret that almost caused one's internal organs to rupture and vomit blood. All these emotions were so clear that everyone could empathize with him. The ambush below has been broken. We have suffered a crushing defeat. Amo Tianji, did you hear that? It's Li Wubo. It's actually him? How can it be? Li Xiangxi stood up at once. The ambush below the layer of snow has been broken? How is that possible? Li Chuanbo raised his head in disbelief. Such a tight ambush can be said to be the work of the gods. It's flawless. How can it be broken before the final battle has even begun? This is impossible? Something's not right. Let's go and take a look. Amo Tianji was also somewhat baffled. Several people rushed out as though they were flying. A moment later they came to the layer of snow. A lone human head was seen facing the sky. It was Li Wubo. His face was filled with grief and indignation. His eyes were still wide open. He had actually died with his eyes wide open. Looks like the ambush below has really been broken. This is really unexpected. Amo Tianji sighed. Li Wubo went down with the last wave of the second team. His hiding spot can be said to be extremely well hidden. Also, with Li Wubo's character, unless he's at the end of his rope, I'm afraid he won't. Li Chuanbo's expression was sinister, as though a storm was brewing. He bellowed furiously, I'm just curious about one thing. The ambush here can be said to be flawless. With so many resources used and the geographical advantage, it's not an exaggeration to say that we have all the advantages. How can it be broken just like that? Amo Tianji was silent for a moment. Then he said, if there's no internal chaos, there's definitely no reason for it to be broken. That's the only possibility. Li Chuanbo's beard flared up. He bellowed furiously, who would dare to leak such a big clan matter? Who would leak it? I don't believe that there would be such a traitor in the Li clan. I'll go down and take a look. Amo Tianji and the rest couldn't stop him in time. Li Chuanbo bellowed furiously and quickly sank into the layer of snow. A low-grade supreme martial artist sank into the layer of snow. Just the protective aura around him was enough to ward off all evil. Withstanding a series of attacks, he went all the way down just like that. He happened to see a Li clan expert being besieged. The situation was already precarious. Li Chuanbo bellowed furiously and struck out with his palms. With two loud bangs, two experts from the allied forces had their bones and tendons broken. They flew out from both sides, spurting out blood. Then furious roars rang out from all directions. Countless experts from the allied forces swarmed over. Li Chuanbo lifted that Li clan expert with one hand. His left hand quickly drew a circle. A strong gust of wind blew out, blocking everyone dozens of feet away. Then he dashed out as though he was flying. Even though Li Chuanbo was a top-grade expert, he couldn't take on so many people head-on by himself. The next moment, with a thud, Li Chuanbo flew out of the layer of snow again. Standing on it, he placed the person he had saved in front of him and stuffed a pill into his mouth. However, this person was already at the end of his life. He was on his last breath. With the help of the pill, he regained his vitality and mumbled, Old master. Li Chuanbo's eyes darkened. He knew that he couldn't be saved. He asked evenly, tell me, how did the ambush break? Hearing that, the person's eyes suddenly revealed an intense fury that couldn't be vented. He wanted to speak, but due to the excessive emotional shock, he started coughing violently. Li Xiangxi hurriedly pressed his hand against his back and slowly channeled his internal energy. However, he shook his head. He could clearly feel that the person's vitality was gradually dissipating. Such injuries were really hard to heal. Li Ju. That damn bastard. That person was filled with intense hatred, gnashing his teeth as though he wanted to skin Li Ju alive. Originally everything was fine. We had been waiting for the arrival of the final battle. It was that bastard Li Ju who jumped out on his own without rhyme or reason. He was pursued by the enemy, but in a panic he didn't know where to go and led us to every place where we were lying in ambush. In the end, all of us were exposed. Many of our brothers were blocked in their caves and beaten to death. This person was seriously injured. Originally he was already on the verge of death. However, when he talked about this, the intense hatred in his heart actually made him speak more fluently. We had no choice but to come out and fight, intending to fight to the death. However, we had already completely lost the geographical advantage. The enemy outnumbered us. We were no match for them at all. The eyes of this Li clan expert were turning white, his throat gurgling. Finally he roared, "Li Ju. Even if I die, I won't let you off." Chapter 1534. Li Xiangxi lowered his head sadly. Li Chuanbo was trembling all over. Even his beard was trembling. Suddenly he roared, "Li Ju." His voice was like thunder. At this moment, Li Chuanbo was obviously extremely angry. Mo Qianji frowned. He also felt that this turn of events was a little too troublesome. He had spent so much effort to set up such a flawless plan, but it was actually destroyed so cleanly by an idiot. This was really a change that no one could have expected. There's no other way. We have to change the original plan. Mo Qianji let out a long sigh. He didn't expect that after Diwu Qingrou's side had an internal conflict, the same situation would happen before he could finish gloating over it. Was this really Heaven's will playing tricks on them? I'll go down again. Look at the situation and see if I can save a few people. Li Chuanbo frowned. In Li Chuanbo's opinion, the current situation was so bad that they had to think of ways to remedy it. If they could save the remaining Li clan brothers, they would at least be able to preserve some fighting power. Most importantly, the old man really couldn't bear to let his descendants sacrifice themselves in vain. "No, you definitely can't go down anymore." Mo Qianji hurriedly stopped him. "Just now, I didn't stop Elder Li from entering the danger zone because the situation was unclear and I needed to understand the current situation. Now that the situation is clear, it can be said that it's chaos down there. Unknown dangers may occur at any time, especially since there's no way to see anything down there. Even if you force yourself to go down, it'll be useless. It's not worth it. I'll pay attention to some dangers, but can I always watch them all get killed? If I can preserve a bit of fighting power, I'll have a bit more chance of survival." Li Chuanbo was obviously very anxious. It was rare for him to doubt Mo Qianji's decision. "Elder Li, I know that you're anxious, but if you go out again, the allied forces will definitely not sit by and watch. Xiao Qinyu will definitely follow closely behind with his men. If you're trapped here too, there's no need to fight the rest of the battle. Now that things have come to this, saving people is definitely not the best plan. We can only activate the follow-up change of the 3-light array in advance, the sunlight array." Mo Qianji sighed. Activate the sunlight array in advance? Yes, this is the only way to break the current situation. But this is only the second team. Mo Tianji said indifferently, "Elder Li, could it be that you want to wait until all of them are dead before you make up your mind?" A shudder ran through Li Chuanbo's body. His gaze was stern and stern. After a long while, he nodded silently. "That's fine too. Fine. Let's do as you say." Mo Tianji's white robe fluttered as he turned around and left. At this time, action was the most practical thing to do. Li Chuanbo followed closely behind, but both he and Li Xiangxi's father's footsteps seemed unusually heavy. Under the layer of snow, Li Ju was still running crazily, constantly exposing his family's hidden ambush spot to the enemy. At this moment, young Master Li was running blindly as if he had lost his soul. He was completely like a walking corpse. He no longer had the ability to think. He could only instinctively seek the protection of his people. Even if the people who came out were killed immediately, he would still feel safer because he saw his own people. He still had companions. Having companions was equivalent to having protection. However, he would never have thought that his foolish actions would drag his entire clan into the bottomless abyss. Behind him, there were more than 20 high-level supreme martial artists tailing him. In addition, there were 7 or 8 supreme martial artists of 7th grade and above. Their eyes shone with a cruel light. They stared at him firmly, not letting him escape. The most ridiculous thing was that those 7 or 8 supreme martial artists of 7th grade and above had another purpose, which was to protect Li Ju's life. This was because there were already several groups of Li clan members who had launched suicidal attacks in order to get rid of Li Ju. Unfortunately, under the protection of those 7 or 8 supreme martial artists of 7th grade and above, all attacks were useless. And before confirming that the Li clan members under the snow were not all dead, Li Ju must not die. This was a treasure to guide the way, a treasure to defeat the enemy. The other Li clan members would be killed the moment they appeared, but Li Ju could move freely. However, Li Ju himself did not notice this at all. He was still blindly seeking the protection of his own people, trying his best to do so. He had lost all rationality. He was actually safe. He was actually the safest Li clan member. At this moment, the only Li clan member who was safe. Save me, save me. Li Ju rushed over with disheveled hair, repeating the actions and words that he had repeated countless times. He shouted towards a cave hidden under the snow, but there was no response. He actually raised his palm and swept away the snow, revealing an extremely hidden cave. Come out and save me, I'm Li Ju, why are you not coming out to save me? I'm being chased, I'm going to die. The people inside almost cursed. You're begging us to save you? We're begging you not to implicate us. You're going to die, why aren't you dead yet? If you're really dead, the world will be really peaceful. But since the entrance of the cave had already appeared, there was no point in hiding anymore. The 3 people inside could only choose to show themselves. Their path of survival had already been cut off, and the only meaningful thing they could do for the Li family was to kill Li Ju. Palm energy, fist energy, sword energy, these 3 people in the cave gathered their last wishes and attacked with all their strength. They only had one goal, to kill the scourge. Unfortunately, they were destined to be disappointed. At the moment when the 3 fatal attacks were about to reach Li Ju, there were several even more tyrannical forces that blocked their attacks horizontally. There were also several gentle forces that sent Li Ju out of this place of death. Then, more than 30 high-level supreme martial artists of the allied forces quickly surrounded them and attacked the cave. In just one round of attacks, 2 people had already turned into green smoke and rotten flesh before they could even leave the cave. Don't come over. Li Ju, who had already escaped from danger, was still full of fear. His pupils were dilated, and under the shouts of chase, he scrambled to escape, shouting, "Save me, save me, save me." The terrain was gradually rising. Although Li Ju didn't feel it, the faces of the allied forces behind him were full of seriousness. The Li clan had sent out a total of 4 teams, all of which were hidden under the snow. The first 2 teams that came out were now almost completely wiped out. And this area was close to the ambush location of the other 2 teams. They couldn't help but raise their vigilance. At this time, Mo Tianji had already returned to the mountain peak. He had entered an extremely hidden cave. His right hand pressed down somewhere, and this cave was enveloped by the 3 light formations. It was as hard as iron and stone. Suddenly, Mo Tianji leaped up. Here, there were 3 unusually complicated formations. All of them were set up with purple crystal jade essence, emitting a dazzling radiance. The entire cave was illuminated by the purple crystal jade essence, as if it was a colorful illusion, magnificent and brilliant. Mo Tianji walked to the center of the formation and stood there with his eyes closed. Li Chuanbo heaved a long sigh. Mo Tianji slowly stretched out his hand. At this moment, his hand suddenly turned transparent like white jade. A golden copper coin suddenly appeared in his hand. After a series of flips, it suddenly floated into the air at the same time, forming a small starry formation, emitting an unusually dazzling radiance. Then, it floated into the center of the sunlight formation. Under a series of flashes, the sunlight formation emitted a dazzling white light. Along with the purple crystal jade essence around it, it shattered and turned into nothingness. The sunlight formation has been officially activated. Mo Tianji let out a muffled snort. His face turned pale. Then he said calmly, "Inform everyone to continue hiding. Don't come out at all, lest they get implicated and get caught in the crossfire." Li Xiangxi immediately gave the order. The Li clan members on the mountain peak all disappeared without a trace. A dense flow of air was activated, shooting straight into the sky and merging with the rising sun. The sunlight in the air actually showed some strange changes, as if some strange change was happening. Then, under the layer of snow, a buzzing sound seemed to be coming from deep underground. After the Li clan members who were lying in ambush felt this vibration, they seemed to have received some kind of signal. Without prior agreement, they charged out from their respective hidden caves and attacked the enemy with all their might. The suddenness of this moment really caught them off guard. The experts of the Allied forces who had had a smooth journey thus far were much less vigilant because of the previous battles. Under this sudden attack, they actually felt somewhat unprepared. In a moment, quite a number of people lost their lives under this strange attack. The reason why this surprise attack could be so successful was mainly due to three aspects. Firstly, the Allied forces' previous battles had been too smooth, so their vigilance was naturally much lower. Secondly, the location of the battle was under the layer of snow after all. It was the battle location that the Li clan was most familiar with. On the Allied forces' side, the only person who could contend with the Li clan in this aspect, the Ling clan, who was equally familiar with fighting in snow, was not here. This was also an important reason why the Li clan's surprise attack was successful this time. And the most important reason was that Li Ju was only familiar with the ambush locations of the first two teams. As for the other two teams, he basically knew nothing about them. It was precisely because of this great misfortune that there was an opportunity left for this desperate counterattack. It also left an opportunity for Mo Tianji and the entire Li clan to turn the situation around. However, a momentary glory had nothing to do with eternity. After all, the Allied forces had the advantage in numbers. Whether it was in terms of numbers or the level of their experts, they were far superior to the Li clan. After a moment of panic, they quickly stabilized their footing and both sides began to fight underground. No one chased after Li Ju anymore. The Li clan members wanted to kill the traitor, but they were powerless. They had already exhausted all their strength to fight against the strong enemy in front of them. They really did not have the energy to deal with that scum of the clan. As for the Allied forces, Li Ju was already a completely useless piece of trash. Such a useless piece of trash, no one was willing to take another look at him. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.